Hey, thanks again for joining us here on the Gill Athletics Connections podcast. I'm going to embarrass him. I am here with legendary Coach
Not a
Ron,
good word. Not a good word.
Coach Ron Allice. Ron, how are you, sir?
I'm fine, thank you. Thank you
I
for the
oh, though it's all our honor. I mean, to be able to hear your journey is going to be really interesting and really exciting for others in our profession to hear this. I'm excited for this.
well. We'll see after it's over how excited you are.
I have to give a shout out to a friend of ours, Gabe, over at.
Gabe Rivera is, I have to do things to keep myself occupied, and since he's now the current director of track and field at Long Beach City College, which I not only went to school at but coached for over 16 years, it's my way of giving back. I just help out wherever they need me. I give advice when they ask me, and so on. And it keeps me young, keeps me involved with young people. I'm not worried about whether somebody has a chance to make an Olympic team or a national team or win a championship. I'm there to help people and give back to a city that I grew up in, and it's my way of saying thank you.
Well, that seems like two peas in a pod there because Gabe wanted to give him a shout out. He was instrumental in one of our former guests, Bob Thurnhofer. They were college teammates. And then Gabe reached out to me and said, "Hey, I've got this guy on staff named Ron Allis. You should talk to him." So just shout out to Gabe for connecting you and I and just being a giver.
Well, that's we'll see if that was a good recommendation.
Well, you talked about giving back to a school that you went to, and as we'll learn, really a community, an area that you grew up in. Why don't we get in our Wayback Machine here? Why don't we start with uh, how you grew up in regards to track and field? When did you start competing in track and field, and how did that become a part of your life?
Well, I was not a versatile athlete. In fact, I wasn't an athlete at all in my formative years. And I found out that by playing various games and so forth, that I had some foot speed. And a cousin of mine gave me his shoes, and I put something in the stuffing of it so that it would fit. And he took me out and showed me how to run a little bit. Um, I went to I grew up in one neighborhood, and then because of financial difficulties with the family, we moved into an inner city environment, and I my life changed. I was to go to this middle school called Franklin, and I thought that I would go out for the track team. Well, I got my doors blown off and got real humble. In fact, real shy after that, maybe this was not something that was set out for me.
Hmm.
1 year later, uh, made all the difference in the world. I beat everybody in school. And so I got accepted into an environment that allowed me to develop. Um, I only had two skills or talents, if you call it that, and they were minimal at best. One was music, and the other was the ability to run. And I was fostered by a man who um, literally took me under his wing. My father became ill, and I kind of was the man of the house to some extent, and always had to work and do so forth and so on. And at that time, uh, I was immature and was not necessarily hanging with the right people. And he turned me around, and he showcased my abilities to run and my showcase to be able to demonstrate my musical skills. And so from there, um, he saved me a couple of times, and I'll be forever grateful to him. His name was Buck Catlin. He saved a lot of young people, um, and I got a building, in fact, an auditorium, because he used to put a talent show on every year, and that's been one of my other goals since I've retired, is to give back to those people who have made an impact on other people's lives, not only mine, but many people, in his case, tremendous athletes that he influenced and fathered, and also people in the music field and others who went on to fame and fortune.
Did
So
you
his
say,
name was Buck Catlin.
yeah, I was going to ask Buck Catlin,
Yep, yep.
and he fostered both your track and music side.
Yeah, I'm kind of I don't know about my left hand anymore, but I'm still good in the car. I was a percussionist, if that's what you want to call it, and I'm a jazz buff, and that's been my other love in life outside of track and field.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's really cool. I love the multifacetedness there. I like that. What do you think changed? You mentioned middle school really getting humbled and not being a track guy, if you will, and then your freshman year.
The people I lined up against weren't slow and uncoordinated. Let's put it that way.
And unfortunately, you were.
Well, I got to the point where I was accepted for my two talents that I had.
Yeah, that's awesome. And how did those talents, as you went through high school, they beget you to go to college?
Oh, I carried books around. I'm never sure that I opened them up during my time in high school. But my focus was on my ability to receive recognition for running. And I went to Long Beach Poly High School, which is probably one of the most famous high schools in the United States. It has had more NFL football players, more professional baseball players, more Grammy winners, more actors, you name it. It's a very, very famous school. There are some things that you walk in the door, you enter to learn, go forth to serve, and it's a home of scholars and champions. And if there was ever a truer story, it has been a national producer of gifted people, athletically and beyond.
I think is that the high school home of Snoop Dogg?
Yes, Snoop Dogg is one of our.
Well, you said music, so I knew you would know.
Well, we can go, from Thelma Houston to, we can go. I can start rattling off, and I'll use your hour up just talking about the people. Billie Jean King. I can go on and on and on.
Well, what is it with, you brought up a good point. I mean, I grew up in Alabama and I still knew of LB Poly, right? What is it? Is it population? Is it culture? What is it that has been sustained for decades of really excellence on all fronts with that high school?
I think it's all of the above. There's always been tremendous coaches and tremendous interest in sport in the city. And they've been very supportive of people who have excelled and fostered people to see to it that they continued on their path of excellence.
And at least on the track side, there's another school right there, LB Wilson, I think, right? Lots of.
And I'll talk about that in a minute too, because I got a chance to coach there as well.
Really?
And yes. And Long Beach Wilson is another aspect of Long Beach, which that rivalry between those two schools over the years, as well as what they produced and who they had to stay around and so on. I'll talk about that later, but yes, there is definitely a Long Beach Wilson. And there are five high schools in the city, including a parochial school in St. Anthony's and so on, Lakewood, Jordan, Milliken, Wilson, Poly, and so on. And that league is of those schools just within the league are tremendously competitive and have produced unbelievable talent.
Yeah, I got to imagine that's got to be one heck of a conference meet.
Yes, it was. It always will be. Yes.
So where did LB Poly? You graduated there. What was the next step?
Well, my next step was, as I told you, I carried the books. I'm not necessarily always read them, but no, I was a C student, and I was into music, into playing, into running, and I was also responsible with my family to be there, to continue to help. And so as a result, I went to the community college, which was Long Beach City College.
Hmm.
And, but let me go back to Poly.
Okay.
Um, the coach at Poly had been there for 20 years, from 1948 to 1968. His name was Leon Foreman, and he had an assistant coach named Ed Rice, who was the announcer and statistician person, expert, that also coached me for the state meets and all the big meets. He was the person that everybody wanted to hear on the mic. But Leon Foreman was a very, very innovative person. And what I mean by that, he ran programs where he would sift out talent like no other. This is long before girls could compete, so this is just guys and young men and so forth. His different contests, decathlons, and so forth and so on. He had a way of screening and finding a place in an event for somebody. And he was tremendously successful. One of the most in the history of track and field, high school wise in California. They won multiple CIF championships and 3 or 4 state titles. And so he was a very, very, I have pictures of him here in my man cave that we're talking from, but I wondered why he always wore a bow tie. Then when I went to SC, I found out what Cromwell looked like all the time. So I guess it was an image that you wanted to portray. So anyhow, no, Leon Foreman had built an unbelievable program, and I could give names that would blow you away, but we'll get to that later. So from Long Beach Poly, I went to Long Beach City College, and a gentleman by the name of Joe Lanning was the next person that had a tremendous impact on my life. He made a man out of me, and we'll talk about him later because he stayed with me off and on as a mentor, as a colleague, and in his 70s even came up and helped me at USC. So he was very, very special. And that's another project that I've gotten done. The entire side of Veterans Stadium in Long Beach, which is 11,000 seat stadium, is all dedicated to him and the school records that have been set at Long Beach City over the years. And so very special coach. And he alone has produced more individual state champions in community college in California than any other single person. And I'm not blowing smoke. The bottom line is, whether it's a thrower, a jumper, a vaulter, a sprinter, quarter miler, an intermediate hurdler, he has coached all of them. And when you have assistant coaches that don't always get the credit for coaching somebody, whatever the event that he was presented with talent, he took that person and it was like money in the bank. And so there are a lot of people who are specialists in this sport. I think you need to know about, when I answer a telephone or a conversation on a telephone, I say track and field, and that's what it is. That's what he was. And he taught me that.
That's a concept we're hearing from some other great coaches. Brooks Johnson talked a lot about not being a sprints coach, not being a distance coach, but being a track and field coach.
That's right. That's what your obligation, that's what your responsibility is. That's your profession.
That's interesting. We get, I don't even want to say pigeonhole, but I think sometimes we as coaches pigeonhole ourselves. We want to be the best coach in a certain event, but I think seems like there's some advantages of knowing a lot about all of the events.
You never stop learning.
Yeah.
That includes me at 80.
Okay, I'm gonna put a pin in that right there. I'm gonna come back and ask that question right there then. What you do today at 80 to keep getting better. I love that. And it was a different time, your family structure and everything different with education.
Right.
Was being a track coach in your mind at all at this point? And if not, what were you thinking as far as a career?
I did not know. I'd like to have let's say at least $1 for every time I say I'm going to quit. During my first 2 years in college, which because before I told you I carried the books, I never opened them. Once I opened them and I decided, that, your senior year in high school, you got to do a paper on what you want to do in life. And I told you it was either music or it was going to be, and, I thought, well, I'll be a musician. Okay. Well, you know, for those people who, when I was in middle school, I was in the group that 3 or 4 of those people became the group war. Yeah, you understand. And but I thought maybe I can do that. Uh, or my other thing is I can run or I could coach. And so, but when I got into anatomy and physiology and so forth, that's a wait a minute here. And so, but I had a couple of good friends who kept saying, a lot of us, you know, didn't want to go into the service and thought, well, I get the chance to keep running and performing and so on. And I hung in there. And I found that by hanging in there, I made it. And so those 2 years in community college gave me direction. And as a result, I was on my way.
And something with the sciences stirred something in you?
Yes, it did. And we'll talk about that later. What I did my master's thesis on and some of these other things. Yes, it did. It started giving me an idea of the human body and what, was too early for body mechanics because that came later. But, anatomy, physiology, it was kind of a turn on to some respects in regards to um, human body performances, training systems, and things like that. So, but anyway.
Did you need that kind of, I'm gonna call it a wake up call. It's not a great term for it here. But did you need that awakening of the science to help you move on to the 4-year, or like was that ever in doubt that you were going to go to a 4-year after the community college?
At that point, it was a pride thing. Well, I'm not going to drop out now. And track and field kept me going. I had success. I was a national caliber guy. I was in the sport and I did well and so on. And I was part of, I ran and, we were kidding around and so forth and so on. Somebody sent me a program, said I was in the first Mount Sac relays. I said, well, that dates me a little bit. So they found my name in the program. But anyway, I was part of groups where I had a chance to be part of the relay or was this or that and so on. Then I got recruited to leave and go to right down the street to Long Beach State. And once I went there, that was Dr. Jack Rose.
Oh, yeah.
Who is Dr. Jack Rose? Well, his first comment out of his mouth every day is what a beautiful day it is. He was the most positive person you ever want to be around in your life. He was head of the Track Coaches Association. He was one of the curators and first directors of the Track and Field Hall of Fame. He had a philosophy of you all come. I have a track. Anybody who wants to train, post-collegians, whatever else, he created an environment. He got outstanding athletes that would come back to do grad work or needed a place to train. And the trade-off was, will you help coach these young people? And so, I wasn't coached by Jack Rose because I was coached by, people who were outstanding athletes and so forth and so on, who had just left the collegiate setting or were still trying to make it an Olympic team and so forth. And those are the people who helped coach us. His influence, because of the fact that he was a historian, had an impact on me. He taught the history of the Olympic Games and never got away from us understanding what the tradition of this sport is, how important that is, and how you learn from that. The history of this sport, it is the ability to run, jump, and throw. That's what you do in any sport that you're involved in. But there is a historical significance to our profession that everybody should understand and appreciate and look closely at.
So we've kind of glossed over this. What events were you in? What was your kind of specialty events?
I was a
as an
quarter
athlete?
miler.
You're a
I was
quarter
a
miler.
quarter miler. I was a quarter miler.
So
And
who did?
so I was the school record holder, but I got there before all the talent showed up. And so one of my colleagues and one of my close friends said that he was on his way to church and he just loosened his tie and broke the school record on his way to church. His first time he got to the school. So,
You're
and
just a
I think there
placeholder.
was some truth in that too.
So who were some of the?
But the school record was up for a while anyway. Yeah.
Yeah. So today we talk a lot about how I'm gonna say kids don't know some of the history of, guys my age and the athletes and the history they were talking about. Who were, as a quarter miler, who were some of the guys that, and I would want to say guys and gals, but I know we didn't have a lot of women's track back then. Who were some of the athletes that you looked up to historically in track and field?
Uh, I hate to say that because there were so many people that you had looked at as, oh, I would love to be like that. Whether it was a sprinter, it was a quarter miler, was whether you ventured into another event or move up or whatever else. I was just, and to be quite frank, I was always in a competitive situation with it where I was at, trying to be the best I could be against the people who I lined up against every week and so on. And having had success at Poly and been part of Long Beach City College's program where we won, I was going to a program where it was on the verge of going, even though it was Division II at that point in time, the talent level was now changing and it was starting to make a difference. And so being a part of that and lining up, whether it was somebody at another school, another university, or whether lining up against a teammate, it was the environment, the competitive environment started to rise.
And you had those athletes that are coming back or needed places to train that were there every day at practice as well.
Absolutely. And again, this was in the early 60s. I graduated from Poly in 1958. In 59 and 60, I was at Long Beach City College as an athlete. And then from 61, 62, I was at Long Beach State as an athlete. And then from there, after that, Jack Rose made me a grad assistant. And so in those days, you didn't, that's when freshmen couldn't compete with the NC2A rules and so on. And so I then took whatever walk-ons and whatever else we had to try to form a track team. And I never forget one of the first meets or terminations of the first meets that I was coaching as my freshman group. We went up to UCLA and Ducky Drake the field is named after Ducky, the great trainer, and at UCLA and track coach in those days. We went and ran on Trotter Field or whatever it was long before it became Drake Stadium. And I had an athlete that was running in lane 7 or 8 in the 200 and the gun went off. And before he got through the middle of the first turn, everybody had gone by him and he went out a side gate and I never saw him again. So that shows you the talent level.
Some people self-select.
So that'll give you the start of my career as a coach. Anyway, and that's a true story, I might add. So, as a grad assistant, I was finishing up my degree, and that was a full-time deal. I got married in 62, and probably the greatest gift of my life. And I could have never, ever, ever accomplished anything in this sport or in this profession if it weren't for her. And that having a partner in life that understood the craziness that all of us possess by being dedicated to this sport, I could have never, ever, ever accomplished what I was able to do, not only from the people around me and the athletes that I had, but because of her understanding and support. But so my next year as a grad assistant, that in 64, just about finished up, ready to graduate and look for a job as a physical education teacher someplace, hopefully. And Jack Rose approached me after practice and said, you know, there's a little group of girls that Buck Catlin started over at Franklin Middle School, and they're 5 girls, and you know, they need some help coaching. And would you get together with them after your regular practice, and we're working here, and help them? I said, okay, no problem. Well, there were 5, 6, 7, 8 girls, and their name was the Long Beach Comets. And of those 5, 6, 7 girls, one of them, his name was Martha Watson. She was a long jumper, and she was an 18-foot long jumper, 1810 to be specific. And at 17 years of age, in 4 months' time, she went from 1810 to 21.3.
Wow.
And made the Olympic team. So that's at that point in time, I thought, ooh, maybe I can do this. And then in addition to that, but you know, really, she was very gifted. She ran on the sprint relay team in 2 Olympic Games, so
Wow.
her leg speed, and that's needless
Yeah.
to say, correlated. She was a great athlete, and she was a 4-time Olympian, which means no matter what I did in practice, she was very gifted.
Right. Right.
And then Sonia Gus was also in that first 5 or 6, and she ended up number 2 in the nation, behind in the national championships in '64. But where are they going to go to school? Well, there
Yeah.
was only one school in America. They graduated from Poly, both of them. Where are they going to go to school? There's only one school in America that provided any form of subsidy for young girls and women, and that's the very famous Tennessee State and the very famous Tiger Bells.
The Tiger Bells. Yeah, of course.
Right? And you know, Brooks addressed Ed Temple and so on. And they made up the Olympic team from 56, 60, 64, and even 68 into 72. A good percentage of the women that represented the United States were all Tiger Bells. So that was the only place. And, you know, I have story things of other people that wanted to go to Tennessee, but, you know, it was a historical Black school and so on. And it was a very special place. And Sonia ultimately came back, but Martha was there through 68, so 2 Olympic Games. And then later on came back, and I coached her up through a certain time until my college situation didn't allow that time. But that was my beginnings. And after I started with the girls in '64 with that group, I then stayed with it for the next 4 years. At the same time, I was coaching at high school. My first job was in the LA City schools, and as a physical education teacher in Wilmington, California. And from there, I would every day afterwards go and recruit and coach. And I remember the principal saying, "It really doesn't look good you putting the girls in your car after work and taking, you know, whatever." But the bottom line is, it was constantly, we built that group to over 100.
Wow.
I combined with a guy named Dave Rada, who was very prominent in women's track and out of the same area here as I was. And he had the younger girls, I had the older girls, and that became the Long Beach Comets. In fact, for a while, you know, after I left, even Mary Decker, you know, had a little short span of time with the Comets as well. But no, after a year in the LA City schools as a PE teacher at the middle school level, a person who he and I were very, very close friends. But this was 1965. And I had gone through the gladiator test to get tenure in the district and showed my skills to be able to wrestle and do all these other sports activities. And I was going to be director of the middle school PE department, this new high middle school. I get a call from this guy named Willie Williams, who he and I competed since middle school against each other. He was out of Compton, went to San Jose State and Speed City, and
Yeah.
Willie was one of America's best 1-2-4 guys. And Willie had come back to Long Beach State when I was a grad assistant for him to finish up and get his teaching credential. And he had just taken over the job at Compton High School. And he wanted me to come. And the principal did not want me. He said it was very turbulent times in the summer of 1965, and with Watts and everything else that was going on. And he talked the principal into taking me. Well, we lit it up. The two of us together were a good team.
Yeah.
And he gave me my break to be his assistant. And we had talent and we knew what to do with it. And it was a wonderful experience for me. My time there, I taught history and coached, and I had everything from the 4 through the 2 mile to coach and so on.
Boys and girls?
No girls yet.
No girls there. Yeah. Okay. All right.
Oh, Title IX didn't come in until, to be quite frank with you, really come into effect till 77, 78. This is 1965.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you. How much or did you face pushback? Like when you were working with the Long Beach Comets, was there ever pushback to you coaching girls and women at that point?
No, in fact, I coach at Compton and I go back to Long Beach and work with the girls at night, under lights. Absolutely.
But just in general, like at Compton and other high schools, there was no opportunities.
No.
Wow.
Like there were girls in Compton. There was a Compton group and some of those girls ultimately competed for me as well. In fact,
so like in a club type system?
Yeah, it was a total club system.
But not high school.
No, that's what you learned to do. I did everything from car washes to you name it in order to raise money for those girls. I went in front of, what we did, went in front of the city council, line the girls up in the front row and say, wouldn't you like to see these young ladies get to the national championships and so forth and so on, and they earned their way and so on. No, you put on meets and so forth and so on. And we'll get into that later on. But in those days, it was just clubs, just for the club system for girls alone. Now the club system is both boys and girls, and it's very cumbersome. And that's another issue which we'll talk about later on. But no, my year at Compton was a great awakening. It was a great experience for me. Willie was like a big brother to me all the way, and we had great success. Some of the people, I ultimately, I had a chance all of a sudden to get the job at Long Beach Wilson, a head job after 1 year at Compton.
Wow.
And so, but then Compton wouldn't let me go because I'd already signed a contract to come back. So we went, between Willie and I, we went and got a guy named Malachi Andrews, which was one of the first African Americans ever to compete at the University of Arizona. He was a multi-talented guy. He ended up ultimately later on being a writer. He was a man for all seasons. And a little story of that was a guy next to me who taught typing in English and so forth and so on, would listen to the students and write down, what does that mean, if the slang word or this or that. And after I left, the two of them got together and they wrote a book that became a staple in Black history courses at the college level. And that same guy that became an author ended up being one of the chief writers for the Olympic Games in '84. So that
Wow.
year at Compton was a very, very special year for me,
Yeah.
and so on. So I, by finding Malachi to take my place, Mal Anders, I left it and went to Long Beach Wilson, around a lot of storied coaches, the Skip Rowlands, the Al Johnsons, those people who were, Skip Rowlands in the Hall of Fame at UCLA in two sports. But these are guys who dedicated their life to coaching, had no ambition to go to the next level.
Hmm.
That was their life's work, and so on. And that was an influence on me as well. And so I was still coaching the women's team, the girls team. And so there was no PE jobs. So I'm back in the classroom teaching history. God help those children. I'm not sure that their perspective is the same, that I had an opportunity to expose them to. But anyway, but what did I do? I had no place. So I took the other side of the stadium, that nobody went to except in the fall. There were the 2 ticket booths and the restrooms. So I took one ticket booth and made it into my office. I made the other ticket booth into a changing room for the girls, so that when they would come after the boys were finished training, that they could change in the ticket booth and so on. And I made the 2 restrooms into weight rooms.
Oh, wow.
And so that started, the stadium was track and field at Wilson High School in 1967 to 68.
Was there any?
And so I would.
Was there any weirdness? You come from such a storied program, Poly, and then you go to the rival Wilson.
No. I wasn't. I hadn't gone to Poly to coach yet. I'd been at Poly as an athlete, but
right.
not the other way. And I'll come to that point and how that juncture came about as well. And so I really worked hard and we had good success. We won a championship at Wilson, and the girls were, numbers wise, we were performing and doing very, very well, and so on. And then Leon Foreman at Poly, because, well, my first, to show you, my first track meet at Wilson as a head coach, I go against my alma mater, Long Beach Poly. And I come into the stadium and I knew everybody, but the bottom line is, in the stadium, it was the turbulent times and so on. And there was a boycott. And so all the African-American athletes were in the stands, and they weren't going to compete, not because of us competing, but it was over issues and so forth that were taking place and still taking place to the.
Yeah, I was going to ask. Remind us of the year.
1967.
And here we are in 2020, still fighting the same issues. Isn't that's amazing? Yeah. Okay, keep going. That's amazing.
And so what happened out of all of that was that naturally we won the meet, and and these are my old coaches,
Yeah.
And Leon Foreman indicated that he would stay on another year and then he would retire, but this is what they would do. And so I go back, and then my second year at Wilson, and we're doing great, tremendously. And I'm working on my master's thesis at this point in time. In the beginning, I was very much into distance running and distance training. And I had great success with a young man that who, one of the first times I got my heart broken. At the conclusion, he ended up being one of the best in the state. And then he said, I think I've spent too much time on track and I want to be the valedictorian. And he did, became the valedictorian. Then he decided he didn't want to go to college. And so he went into the service. Then he was so smart that they wanted to send him to the academy. He didn't want to go to the academy. He wanted to be in Vietnam. He went to Vietnam, and naturally he got shot, but he didn't get killed and brought back. But he ended up being a attorney. But that was the first time.
That's a roller coaster of a life for that guy right there.
Yeah, right. But, I got my heart broken. But anyway, then from there, Polly, Mr. Foreman stepped down, and Polly had to felt that they needed an African American to take over the program, which is very sound thinking, especially in the '60s. And he had been from the Compton School District and so forth, and he's working already over at Poly, teaching driver training and so forth during that summer. And Compton realized that, well, Long Beach Poly wants this guy. He must be pretty doggone good. So they lured him back by saying, you could take the new high school, Dominguez High School job, or go over to Dominguez High School in Compton. And so they offered it to him. And I don't want to say at this point in time, that fool left and went back to Compton. And they called me and said, you want to come home? And I said, don't put the phone down.
I was going to say, how fast did you say yes?
Yeah, but and I remember having a talk with Skip Rowland, a very famous Hall of Fame coach at Wilson. Alice, you could stay here for the rest of your life and coach and so forth and so on. I said, I got to go home. I mean, I grew up in the neighborhood. I knew everybody and so forth. So I went to Poly, and I went and got a guy who was my teammate in college, who I told you on his way to church broke my school record, Jim Richardson. And we went to Poly and made it happen. And, I grew up in the neighborhood, so I knew everybody's fathers, mothers, grandmothers, but the turbulent times weren't over, needless to say. And I was there in the 69 track seasons of 69, 70, 71. And it's, the most historical school in America. The talent level is unprecedented. Again, there's still no Title IX, and there's still no girls and so on. I had 150 out for the team.
Boys.
Yes.
Wow.
I was into music, and I was into the times and so on. We used to, put on a little show where I put everybody in this old garage, which we used as a weight room and so forth, and put 150 guys in there. And the opposing team would come into the stadium, and there's nobody around, and then I'd put music on, and we'd jog out and go through a whole routine. And the meet was over before it started.
This was for track.
This is track. And people used to line up, hang on to the, young kids and everything that were in. People say to this day, they talk about those stories about us warming up to Isaac Hayes, Hot Buttered Soul, and, I got a kick out of it because I'm a music guy and so on. And no, we made it a show. And it was fun. And I think we were able to relate and communicate, and we were able to foster some unbelievable talent. During my first year, we had a young man who ended up being the best low hurdler in America, or was ranked in the top 5 track and field news. And the next year had a distance runner, and that's when I was working on my master's thesis, who still is a city record today in Long Beach for all these years. And he ran, 8:58 for 2 miles in high school. And that's 1970. So,
yeah.
And then the next year, I had a long jumper who jumped almost 26 feet, just under 26 feet in the long jump. And at that time, I then sent him on to Arizona, where Willie Williams, by the way, who left Compton and was the first African-American to have a full-time head job in a Division I school, by the way, at Arizona.
I wonder, there's the Willie Williams Classic, right?
Oh, yes.
And I wonder if that was the same one. Yeah.
And Willie was the sprint coach selected for the '84 Olympic Games, and he passed away. And a very tragic thing, and so on. But no, Willie was a very special human being to me, and I have a picture of him here in my room. So anyhow, along with everybody else. But again, we had those three outstanding young men in those 3 years that I was here. Just otherwise, we had a lot of gifted talent and so on. And I had great support with Jim Richardson and so on. And when I then a teammate of mine in college became the EOP director at Cal Poly Pomona, which is a Division II program. He said, "You want a chance to go to the college level?" And I thought about it. I could still drive there and still, because remember, I'm married, got kids, and I can still commute up the freeway and so on. So we had no scholarships, but if you could qualify for financial aid, yeah, we had scholarships. And so as a result, I came in at mid-year and started after the cross-country season 71 at Poly. I left and went to Cal Poly, and we were on a quarter system. And so the winter quarter, and the spring quarter would start at the end of March. By the time we got to the spring quarter, we'd literally, chased most of the community college transfers around the state, and we lit it up. And we wanted to compete with the big guys. And so, we'd go after the big relay meets and so forth, and West Coast relays, Mount Sac relays, everything else. And, these were second chance guys, at the community college level. The big guys didn't get recruited to the 5-star schools and so on. And so everybody had a little chip on their shoulder and wanted to show that they could line up just like everybody else. And that's what we did. And then by that time I'd come back, I was still that time then also working back. Martha had come back from Tennessee State and worked for her a while. Then eventually Dave Rada worked with her from there on. And, at the conclusion of 2 years, during my time when I was a coach at Poly, I got to know a guy named Ted Banks, a very famous guy named Ted Banks, who, won 16 NCAA titles while at Texas El Paso. But at that time, he had been at San Jose State and then a high school coach. Then he helped Jack Rose for about 3 years or so. And he turned and done a great job recruiting and started to bring some athletes into Long Beach State for Jack. And but then he got the opportunity to go to Texas El Paso. So when he left, Jack decided, I'm going to hold on to the program for one more year, and then I'm going to retire. And so it's 1973. I'd spent 2 years, a year and a half actually, at Cal Poly Pomona, and my alma mater, the job is open. And I was fortunate enough to be hired back at my alma mater at Long Beach State.
It's like one of those no-brainers, like when LB Poly called, no-brainer, I'm going. Jack calls, no-brainer, you're going.
And so, no, there were some other really good people that could have taken that job also, that were later on became coach there and so on after I left. But no, it was a exciting time at Long Beach State. Jerry Tarkanian was leaving, going to Las Vegas, Park the Shark, and you got Lute Olson, who just passed away, a very famous basketball coach, was there, and so on. And
I didn't know that.
There was a lot of really, that was a great time. I was there for 5 years. Tarks told me that I would be there for 3, but I was there for 5. literally we're going from Division II to Division I. So one of the things that one of my teammates in college was a guy named Tom Jennings. A lot of people know who I'm talking about, but he's probably made more money financially off the sport of track and field than anybody else in the history of this sport. When I approached him about that topic, he said, no, I'm number two. But anyway, he.
I think we can guess number one.
And so, because he has the track and field equipment that puts on all the meets. Mm-hmm. If you want all the bells and whistles, you got to go to Tom. Mm-hmm. But Tom was an 800-meter runner. I remember when I was at Long Beach State, he drove up on a motor scooter. He had gone to Berkeley High School. And he said, we introduced ourselves, and he knew more about me than I knew about myself. He was always a stat guy. Mm-hmm. And we had some really good 800-meter runners and so forth, Ralph Lee and others that were really good, but he was the odd man out. And in order for him to get into a meet, it meant that they had to get the 2-mile relay team in and these relay meets. And so he started to promote his 2-mile relay team. And out of that came the 49er Track Club. And out of the 49er Track Club became the Pacific Coast Club. The Pacific Coast Club was a Long Beach-based thing, which then became the club in America, competitive club with the vaulters, the throwers, you name it. And again, it goes back to Jack Rose's open door policy, everybody come train. Because even in the late 60s, prior to the games in Mexico City, guys that were service connected and so forth that were stationed at Fort Ord and San Pedro would come over and train on the track and so on prior to or the year before, the games and so on in Mexico City. So, no, you always had that atmosphere. And then, you had an atmosphere with the Coast Club with all the athletes. Now, this is now the start of Title IX. Okay, just the beginning. But, you had a female that's attached to the Pacific Coast Club, which is Francie LaRue, who was the darling of, outside of Mary Decker, is the darling of women's distance running in America, and so on. And then, you have all the vaulters, from the Ripleys to you name it, the people who, and then who do you have? You have Dwight Stones.
Okay. Yeah.
And Dwight had gone to Glendale High School and then had gone to UCLA, and freshman year at UCLA, he gets a bronze medal in Munich, 72. Okay. Then he went back and I don't know, Jim Bush and him had a disagreement or whatever. And so as a result, he went as a member of the Pacific Coast Club, and, Dwight was outside of Carl and some of the other Lewis and some of the others who were making breakthroughs in what from appearance or guarantees to show up or whatever else you want to call it. Dwight was kind of the guy that took the arrows and so forth and kind of broke through the glass ceiling with some of this. And he was a showman and so on. And he said, you know what? I have a goal in life. I'd like to win an NCAA championship. So Tom approached me and says, you want Dwight? Yeah. Do you want me to stutter?
Right. Yeah.
And so, Dwight came, and he had to sit a year of residence, and so he got half a scholarship, which is a full at mid-year, which is $900. That was what the cost of a scholarship was at Long Beach State. And wait a minute, I'm not done. And for $900 investment, he won the NC2A, the American, and the world record for a $900 investment.
That's the best scholarship
And
ever.
that's the best deal I ever pitched.
Yeah, that one's not gonna be hard to top. I think that one might be impossible to top.
Yeah, and in addition to that, I mean, I really did have some really good athletes. If I can look somewhere around here and run off a couple of some of this stuff here, that Don Baird, I mean, he was on he'd won the Commonwealth Games in Christchurch, New Zealand, and he's in an airport. He's passing through LA to go see Banks in Texas, El Paso, and runs into one of my guys and said, "Well, you ought to get out and talk to Coach at Long Beach." And he walked in the door and stand in front of my office, and he said, "I'm Don Baird. I'm British Commonwealth Games champion in the vault, so forth, so on." Really? Well, he's about 5'7" and bald, and I didn't believe that's who it was. So I ran down to another office and I called Dick Bank, who was a very famous person in our sport at one time or another, the very famous announcer who everybody heard in the very famous 10,000 meters. One of our Billy Mills is finished in the 10,000 meters.
Oh,
that
yeah.
was his voice. That was his voice.
Wow.
And he's a longtime track person involved in our sport. But anyway, he says, "No, that's him." So I didn't walk back. I ran back to my office door. And so Donnie and won an NC2A title for me, jumped to 18 feet and so forth. In those days, that's as good as you can get. And I had another JC transfer named Keith Goldie, who won the javelin in the NC2A, Division I again.
Wow.
That story was great too, because, he was in the first flight and all the studs were in the second flight. And, weather changes in Provo, Utah, and it was a BYU. And he threw a great throw of 250 some feet. And the second flight came up, and here come the storm clouds, and he was NC2A champion.
Wow.
So, but we won the conference meet, and the first thing I did is I'm going to line up against everybody. And I in those days you had track riders luncheons, and every week from the time that I went to Cal Poly, I'd go to the track riders luncheon. I'd be the last up and to say something, but I was there I'd take an athlete every week so that I showcase the athlete and so on. And that's when track was important, especially in LA. And, there were like indoor meets, for example, in those days with the Frankens, Don Franken and his father, Al Franken, who put on, all of the Pepsi meet, the Sun-Kissed indoor. There were a lot of promotional things that were going on in the 70s and so on. So I helped, and it was my way of seeing to it that certain things happened. But we lined up. I even went to the track riders one time and said, we can beat UCLA. Well, I got a lot of publicity. We didn't beat them, but we put on a show. And because we had depth and we had balance. And that's what I've always tried to do, is we're track and we're field. And we got after it. And in those days, if you said that you could beat a Jim Bush dual meet team, you were either smoking something or you were crazy. And but you do what you have to do. And so, I scheduled Oregon. I never forget. I had Dillinger down, and it was on their summer break, and there was an Oregon alum who was one of the big USA track and field officials. He says, "Oh, we'll fill the stands and everything." Well, we did. And I had him down, and I put him up at the Queen Mary. And then they told me after the meet, I thought we had a shot at him, and I didn't realize that they had recruited 2 junior college sprinters. And that because even in the dual meet, one of America's Olympic champion father barely beat our kid, and they ran what 342 in a dual meet in a 1500. You know, there was that kind of competition going on, and that was the father of our person who won the 1500 in the Olympic Games. So anyway, Oregon, but with that story, what happened was they liked it so much in Long Beach, they decided to stay for the week on my tab. As I made it. It took me a long time to pay off that bill, but they always were very nice. I took on Washington, San Jose, had a great dual competition and conference battle with Ernie Bullard, who ultimately became the track coach at USC for 5 years and so on. And Ernie and I were good friends, very close friends. And Ernie we worked together closely when I was in Long Beach City College as well. But no, so we lined up and tried to take on the big guys, and it paid off. And we got a lot of showcase out of that, and a lot of people evolved, and good things happened. So, we were always a top 10 dual meet team, and we were in the top 10 a couple of times thanks to Dwight and so on. So anyhow, so then I got an opportunity. My old coach, Joe Lanning, called me and said, look, there's an opportunity. There's the community college job is opening up. Well, nobody leaves the 4-year level to go to the 2-year level. But I had done everything you could possibly think of to keep this baby alive. Mm-hmm. I had 3.5 scholarships at Long Beach State.
Wow.
I had people on more partials than you could slice a cake. Mm-hmm. Okay. But having in this city, I knew everybody from the mayor to the people sweep the streets. And so, but I had done everything, fundraising, promotion, showcasing, you name it, promotions in the works. And I had, it helped me also in that the Olympic Games here in '84 was coming. Mm-hmm. And that also helped me with some things that I was doing outside of just Long Beach State. And so they told me that, well, my last year at Long Beach State, I got one of my greatest gifts. This man brought me this gentleman who was 56 years of age and couldn't speak a word of English. He's from Romania. A little bit about his history. He survived 4 years in concentration camp. He was Jewish. He nearly lost his life more than once. The only reason he survived was because of his ability to work. He was a big, strong guy. But he then rose through the ranks in Romania after the war, became, even though his best years were over in '48 in the Olympic Games. And then by '52, he became a coach, and then became their national coach. And then his son asked for a visa to come to an American university because he had a sister-in-law that of his wife, who lived in Los Angeles, and he could come here and get a student visa and study engineering. Well, at that time, Romania was a communist country, and as a result, they took his son out of the university there and put him in a work camp.
Oh, jeez.
And he and his wife had the only way to see their son was to go take a train to see their son. So needless to say, they thought he would defect because it was just before the '76 games in Montreal. And through congressional and senatorial uh, and the Jewish community, they got he and his wife and his son out. And so the brother-in-law was trying to find a job for him. He couldn't speak English. SC, UCLA, these people had room for him. And he brought him to me. I said, I'll tell you what, I'll figure this out. So I got him a job as a gardener in the old CETA program, government program, around the administration building at Long Beach State. And I found him, got somebody to donate a place for him to live upstairs near the beach. And I got him rooming with another guy that was a grad student from Puerto Rico. And they spoke Spanish together and so forth and so on. And I used sign language and used a loud voice for he and I to communicate. But guess what? He was a treasure. There was no one in this country that could touch this man in the jumps. I mean, he was phenomenal. So I got an offer I couldn't refuse. The vice president at Long Beach City College would give me tenure for life.
Oh.
Build me a stadium.
Oh.
Veterans Stadium, and give me all my health and dental benefits that I was having to pay for. I'd done everything you could do with 3 scholarships.
All right. Yeah.
When everybody else in those days, I might add, okay, because scholarships went from, in the Cromwell days at USC, from 30 to 28 to 24 to 22 to 18 to 16 to 14 to 13 to 12.6 today. Well, guess what? I had, during the time that everybody else had 18 or better, I had 3. And so I was pulling elephants out of hats.
Yeah.
So I had one other request. I get to bring this gentleman with me. He had no credentials. He had limited English. And they said, we'll get it done.
Wow.
And he taught there and coached for me at Long Beach City College for the next 20 years, but in 16 with me. And he was probably I've had tremendous coaches every place I've been, people who've been dedicated to me, and we've all been on the same page. And sometimes gotten credit. And it's like this to say, well, you had Dwight Stones. I coached Dwight Stones. I stayed out of his way and trained him.
Right.
But guess what? Dwight knew more about the jump than I could possibly ever know.
Right.
The idea is Don Baird, he was pushing 3.5 feet off his handhold. What kind of technician was he? Okay. No, in our sport, that's why you never stop learning. And that means if those opportunities arise and you have somebody that either has the gifts or the talent, then guess what? You better find out something about it. You better be the best you can be. And then sometimes get out of the way. So I'm jumping back and forth, but I'm throwing some little pearls of what I think
absolutely
people ought to look at here. So I took Baruch Elias and we went to Long Beach City College.
Wow.
And I inherited my old coach, Joe Lanning. I got unbelievably, I can't even explain the coaching staff we put together. Later on, once Title IX kicked in, even at Long Beach State, my last years, a young lady that ran for me became the first women's coach at Long Beach State. Just a year ago, she was the most outstanding Masters runner, athlete. I said, because she does all the events, and she's in her 70s. Okay, so my history in women's track is pretty exhausting.
Yeah.
But I got Dan Ripley, the former world record holder in the pole vault, as a women's coach. I had nothing to do with that. He got that on his own. I just got lucky. I had Joe Lanning, who's the most successful individual person with whatever event is, as my hurdle coach and so forth and so on. You had athletes like Earl McCullough. I can go on down the line forever and ever. I brought Jim Richardson, who had been with me at Long Beach Poly, with me. He came. I originally, when I left Long Beach Poly, I made sure that he got the job. And I've kind of done a little of that all the way down the line. And we'll talk about that later too. And I had a staff that you could, with Elias, I'm going to give you some idea then of how the talent pool started to possess, because these are the people that didn't get into the 4-year level or whatever, but these are the school records at Long Beach City College.
Okay.
10-20.
Pretty good.
20-54.
Pretty good.
45-40.
Really good.
147-9.
Oh.
345. 14-21. 29-43. 839 steeple.
Wow.
4 guys that run 1377. 50 flat in the intermediates. 39-6 in the sprint relay. 307. We had relay times, which are mixtures of hurdle splits, which were national records. 65-4 in the shot. 184 in the disc. 179 hammer. 259 in the javelin. 214 now, 25-8 long jump. 54-6 in the triple.
Wow.
And this one will blow your mind. 7, 8 and a quarter in the high jump.
Wow.
17 feet in the vault and 77-26 in the decathlon.
Holy cow.
Those were during my time there. And, I'll put a shout out to Mount Sac, probably historically over the years, depending upon how track and field wants to determine some of these, or maybe a little at Riverside. But anyway, our marks probably in the history of community college track and field is like second to none.
Oh,
and
yeah.
The bottom line is I had a staff that was second to none. I had athletes that came from all over that wanted to be a part of this, and a lot of great performances came about.
How much, with you and your staff, how much of that influences of the Jack Roses, all these coaches that kind of came up in front of you guys, before you guys, how much of an influence were they on what you were doing there during this time?
Well, everybody has always been supportive of me. And let me insert this. Every place I've ever been, the former coach, head coach, has stayed to help me.
Oh, wow.
And that includes Cal Poly. That includes when I went to Poly High School. My former coaches, because in the very turbulent 60s, they went and found the best people who could relate to young people and brought them all to Poly. I mean, I had support everywhere. Right. I mean, even the man that was African-American man was my master teacher when I student taught at Franklin, because I even student taught at the same place. I've coached at every place I went to school.
Wow.
And I've had a support system all the way through. And I've stayed in one place.
Oh, and that's what I was going to say. I love that this happened not only in one area, but it happened in the area that is home as well. I love that uniqueness.
Well, the other thing is, every place I've been, I always want on my staff an old dog. Somebody's been there, been around the block, understands. Yes, You have to have enthusiasm and youth and motivation and all the other things that it takes when you're young. But guess what? That wisdom, that experience, that's a treasure. And every place I've been, I've tried to find an old dog to be a part of it, because the wisdom that they conveyed to me, I never forget. Joe Lanning told me after I gave a big pep talk one time before a state meet championship, and we barely escaped with a win. He said, "That's the last time you give a pep talk." You understand? So, no, you learn over the years of what you do and so on. But having an old dog and being around it, and now I'm the old dog. And I don't know if I have any information or knowledge to convey, but I'm the old dog now.
Do they let you give the pep talks?
I don't give pep talks, but there are a lot of people, that our women's program at Long Beach. I had Valerie Briscoe, won 3 gold medals. She was school record holder, and can she just come back after becoming a mom and so forth? Came back to junior college, broke the school record, needless to say, in the quarter, and then 2 years later, in the Coliseum, she got 3 gold medals. So,
holy cow!
No, I like I said before, I've been able to be, surrounded, and during my time at the community college level, when I first came, I thought, we'll just take the local kids that are right here in Long Beach. And then, Skip Robinson was at Pasadena, and I see these people going from all over. Oh, I got to get in this game. And I got in. We had some, we brought the dual meet back. We would have our dual meet every year at USC when they would have another meet. And I'll never forget, long time sports track writer for the Los Angeles Times, wrote for Track and Field News and everything else. He says, I went to go see a track meet, and I finally saw a dual meet again. Because see, with the scholarship limitations, it started to go away because you didn't have balance anymore. You didn't have the throws, the jumps, and everything else in a meet. And, and we'll talk about this later, but when I came to USC, they had stopped having the dual meet. It was a tri meet because they couldn't fill it all. I said, oh, hell no. No, we're going to do, But anyway, so we showcased that. And, we had great success, but during that, after the next person that was the teams that challenged all that was Taft, that Doug Wells up at Taft, California. They rolled, they were getting guys. There was only one way to get in. You couldn't get out after there. They made sure you couldn't get out. The bus only came in. You couldn't go out and so on. But Doug was a great coach and did a great job. And they were great between the two of us battling. And then I'll never forget the same vice president that talked me into leaving Long Beach State to come to Long Beach City called me up because he now was the president of Riverside City College. And he said, now, are you ready now? And come out here to Riverside to make us get this program going. I said, I'm a beach guy. I can't.
Yeah, I was wondering.
I said, but I got an idea. I said, you want the winningest coach in the history of the NC2A at that time? He said, what do you mean? I said, well, I know this guy named Ted Banks. We're good friends. And he had left Texas, El Paso, and went to work for Converse shoes. And they were going to get in the track and field business and found out that they had to stick to basketball and forget about that track and field stuff. And so now he's, and the head of Converse, he left and became AD at LSU. And so Ted's looking for a job. I don't know if I can talk him into it. I said, but I'll tell you what, I'm going to put both of you on the phone. And he calls me back in about maybe 30 minutes. And he says to me, I want to thank you, but I want you to listen to this. And he goes, I said, what's that? Us coming after you. And so for the next 5 years, Banks and I went to war against each other, and I wouldn't give up that with all of us, whether it's Skip Robbins, Doug Wells, Ted Banks, we battled. The talent level in those days, I mean, in the 1500 state meet, the guy becomes an Olympic champion. You understand? For Riverside, the talent level is unbelievable. And those were great times. Those were fun times, and so on.
They say iron sharpens iron. Sounds like you guys just kept battling and getting better.
Yeah, those were great times. And
That's
then,
awesome.
in '84, because of the Olympic Games situation, I had been involved in lots of things, and also between Long Beach State and Long Beach City, I was into all sorts of promotional things too. I got involved with ARCO and with the Jesse Owen Games, and I did their book and their clinics for kids and so forth and so on. With the LA Times, I did things to promote regional meets and so forth and so on. And then another little thing that a lot of people will probably get a kick out of in my storied history is that I was approached by going to the track riders luncheon by a guy named Harold Smith, who said, I really like the way you put on meets, because and we'll talk about this later on, but we're in the entertainment business, folks. And how you put on track meet, I think, has a lot to do with how we sell our sport. So, and certainly equipment that you deal with, and having all the necessary things that make things function properly and to put on a good show is extremely important. So, Harold had adopted an athlete out of Florida who happened to broke the national high school record, and named Houston McTeer. And he adopted him and brought him out to Los Angeles, and had Tommy Smith, who's a good friend of mine, coaching him, because Tommy at that time was coaching at Santa Monica City College. And said, could we borrow a block? I like your blocks, or whatever else and so on. So Houston needs to use it. Tommy didn't. I'm sure Tommy had a block, but anyway, I was being set up. But anyhow, so he brought it back and he says, I like the way you put on meets and everything. He said, would you be interested in helping me and Muhammad Ali put on track meet? Oh, really? Wow. I said, well, you know what? I'm Long Beach City can't accommodate that, and certainly Long Beach State can't do that. I said, but Cerritos College, I live at Cerritos, just down the street. I'll approach them. So I got Cerritos College, and we put on the first Muhammad Ali meet.
Wow.
And classic story was, in the middle of the meet, there was a straightaway that had a gate, and it's a backstretch of the quarter. In the middle of meet, here comes Ali and his entourage in these limos. And they all pull up, stop the meet. Everybody gets out, and they go and sit down, grab chairs that were used for officials and everything to sit and watch the meet. And all the officials huddled in the middle of the field and said, we're going to boycott until they get off the field, blah, blah, blah. But anyway, the next day in the newspapers, it said, that wasn't a track meet, that was a happening. And it was. And so then Harold approached me about putting on an indoor. Well, there were a lot of other people involved, a lot of famous names, and America's Great Hope in 1960, sprinter and so on. And a lot of other people who were key figures in the movement at that point in time, great Olympians in history. But I was the go guy. And so I went and got the Long Beach Arena. And they went to Canada and got the first 200-meter track, because everybody was running on 160 tracks in those days. So they assembled in Canada a 200-meter track, and we put on the Muhammad Ali meet indoor meet. And it was the first meet on NBC, sports situation. And Harold had made a deal if he you know, if he did well promoting the meet and so forth and so on, that then he could show amateur boxing and so forth on TV.
Wow.
And Houston McTeer would then come with, you know, at that time when he first lured me, would then go to Long Beach State. Well, yeah, I'd already left Long Beach State and gone to Long Beach City. But anyway, people get a kick out of this story. Well, and they were successful. It was a success, and so on. And it was a happening, you know, the celebrities and all the other stuff that went on. But Harold Smith wasn't Harold Smith. Harold Smith was Ross Fields, and there's a book about that. What did I get out of it? I was just trying to promote track and field. I never got a dime. My guy that was my left and right hand was the guy that was a promoter, did all the publicity stuff. He never got paid, and so forth and so on. And I thought it was Muhammad Ali's money. That's what it was all. That he was sponsoring all this. No, they embezzled $21 million out of Wells Fargo Bank. And then Wells Fargo came to me and asked me to sell the track. And then it ended up being put in storage and eventually dry rotted and so forth. But that was the story about that.
Wow.
And Runner's World did a story, and I'll never forget the headline. They had a picture of me in there, and they said, "I guess I'll be naive to ever think that a man's last name is Smith." So if John Smith listens to that, you can tell him.
I was about to say, John. Yeah.
Yeah, no. Well, I, you know, John and I have, you know, I get on one knee and kiss his ring all the time. You know, John and I have lots of fun with each other. But anyway, I took a little side thing because I thought that story would resonate with a lot of people.
That's awesome.
So anyway, but my fascination or whatever, or interest or goal in '84, when Vern Wolf stepped down at USC and retired, Ken Matsuda was his assistant and really made things happen at SC, and Kenny never got the credit that he really should in making things happen. And Vern, just a tremendously nice guy and a good technician. But Vern held to a starting waiver, and it was just before the Olympic Games. It's '84. So he retires and the job's open. And the people that applied for the job at '84, I had a book of everybody's resume. It was like a who's list.
Sure.
Well, the athletic director at that time was a former basketball coach at Long Beach State when I was a student. So he asked me to apply. Well, that was a joke. I wasn't qualified. I wasn't whatever, but at least I got my name in the paper and whatever. So that was it. Then so Ernie Bullard left San Jose State and became the track coach at USC. And, you know, Ernie and I worked together on athletes that I either sent up to SC or maybe they would refer somebody back down to me to have us coach or whatever else during their time before they either sent them back or whatever else. Then during the time, Jim Bush had retired from UCLA and then had worked with the Dodgers and with the Raiders a little bit, and then started to volunteer to help Ernie at USC. And Ernie eventually, I don't know, made a comment or something to the women's athletic director that wasn't appropriate or something. And Ernie is a great guy, but anyway, so the job was open in 1990, and it came down between Jim Bush and I. Well, Jim Bush is a legend. You talk about legend. And I wasn't going to get it anyway, but at that time, the athletic director was a guy named McGee, who was a football guy who ultimately left SC because he was kind of an interim guy. And the women's athletic director ultimately became the athletic director at the University of Washington, and a very famous person in breaking the glass ceiling for women athletic directors. But anyway, in the interview, he said I was asking questions because I had it going in community college with job security and all the other stuff. And I went back to some things I got replied. Well, we may drop men's track someday because of Title IX and all this other stuff, and and just have women's track. And oh, wait a minute here. And so, but anyway, to make a long story, so I go back to the Long Beach paper, said, no, it's not good. What's good for them is not good for me. But anyway, Jim was elevated, and that was going to happen anyway. And that's the time that they really needed to have a women's program started seriously. And during that time, Inger Miller, whose father, Lennox Miller, was a pretty doggone good sprinter, out of Jamaica, and a great Trojan that, got a medal in the Olympic Games in 72, was a dentist in Pasadena. His daughter, Inger, it's made John Smith famous as a coach. Tell him I said that. But during that time, Jim needed a women's coach. And so Warren Edmondson had been an NCAA champion for him at UCLA. And he got Warren's wife was a girl named Barbara Farrell, who was a silver medalist in the Olympic Games right behind the winner in Mexico City. And, I knew Barbara because of the fact that she ran for the Mercarettes when I was with the Long Beach Comets in those days. And Mercarettes had the Charlotte Cooks of the world and so forth and so on. There were a lot of outstanding female athletes at that time in the 60s. And so, because that was the club system. Anyway, that came together, but then over a 4-year period of time, it became dysfunctional for whatever reason. So I get a call in 94. This time it's a new athletic director, and it's Mike Garrett. And I love the man because, but anyway, they met with me and said, you can't bring anybody with you. You got to inherit everybody that's there, and you got to solve the problems and so forth and so on, and make it happen. And I know the history of USC. There is no more storied program. We were talking about Poly. I knew what my obligations and responsibilities were when I took the Poly job. But taking USC, I mean, I don't want to offend anybody at all the places in this country where you have the Texas A&Ms, the Floridas, and everybody else that are on the scene right now. But year in, year out, if you go back into the 20s, the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, and 70s, and 80s, and 90s, and 2000s, there's never been a lull. You understand?
True.
And the history, tradition of Olympians and medalists and so on,
right,
second to none. But I took it naturally. I was going to take it. And for those of I've heard people talking about the financial issues and so on. Guess what? I took a cut pay from junior college to USC.
Interesting.
For all of you who think about the big now, Carroll today, that's a little different story, but in my time, I took a cut.
Yeah, that's interesting.
It was about an even deal, but the deal is that way.
But it's not like it was an automatic riches, right?
No, that's a story for all these guys to hash over. But anyway, the issue is, I thought, I'd make this happen. But Jim didn't want to come back. And so he didn't come back, so I had to do it all by myself. The barber and I did it by ourselves.
Wow.
And he didn't leave the cupboard bare, so we ended up fourth in the NC2A, and you know, I had an automatic 10 points because a guy who was making $5,000 a year at that as a personal trainer, uh, Dan Lang, had a guy named Balazs Kiss, who was ultimately the Olympic champion in the hammer. So, you know, that was 10 points. We were going to naturally, but everybody else performed, did well. Guys went from 47 to 45, and we did well, and we got fourth in the country, and we're right there in the dual meet. And that's the other thing I did. As soon as I got there, I said, "Oh, heck no, we're going to bring this dual meet back." And for 20 years, the meet had been at Drake Stadium at UCLA because SC did not have, 42-inch lanes, not the best track. In fact, they didn't get an all-weather track until I think everybody else already had one. But on that field, no stands. And I said, "Oh, hell no." So I put lipstick on a pig. And I decorated that thing like you've never seen before. And I made them come over for a dual meet. And, it was a tough time because, Bob Larson had taken over for Jim Bush, done a great job. Bob Larson, one of America's best distance coaches. But then he had a staff second to none. He had the very famous John Smith. And then he had the best throws coach in America, and Art Venegas. And then, it was smart enough to realize when scholarships had gone down to 12.6, that let Art and John have the scholarships, and I'll coach everybody up because I can get all those distance runners from the Toads and everybody else. And I'll give one scholarship to a stallion that I'll make one of the best in America. And the rest I'll coach up, which he did. And they won 2 NC2A titles.
Yeah.
And one that I kid about all the time. I love to tease the Bruins, as you well know.
Of course.
I'll never forget that they have a guy whose record right now is in jeopardy. He happens to hold the world record in the intermediates. And there's a guy who is threatened. There are at least 2 guys that are threatening to break his world record before now and this time next year. That I called him because he was an LA City kid, and I won't mention the name. And his nickname was Spider because he was split up to his Adam's apple. And he was like 4th in the highs or something. I thought, this is a community college kid. Well, I called him and he says, "Coach, I just got into UCLA." I said, "Well, that's terrific." I said, "The coaches are going to be excited to have you." He says, "They don't know." So their world record holder walked on to UCLA.
What?
Yeah, that's right. And I like to tease him about that, especially.
What?
I like to tease Larson about that, and John, and whatever chance I get. But anyway, he ended up being the world record holder. So he wasn't given a scholarship. He walked on.
Wow. Some people have all the luck.
There you go. Anyhow, so I don't know how I got off track on this, but that's where they just won 2 NC2A does, and SC had a shining light amongst all of this. Some guy who won the gold medal and is now the current sprint coach at USC, and that was their shining light. And during that time that Bullard was there, and Quincy Watts winning in Barcelona, it was naturally something to hang on to. And through all this, part of my objective was to see to it that Quincy got back to USC. And I'm very happy that happened. And I worked real hard to see that happened.
Was he as great a guy? I love Quincy and I love I mean, those two are just some real gems there. Was Quincy as affable and as good a guy as he is now when he was a student?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I could see that.
No, and he had great coaching between between Bush and John, I mean, come on.
Right.
You
Yeah,
know,
that's true.
it's not
Yeah.
like he had good tutelage and so on. So anyway, and he's perfect. And he was another person that I told him, get out of your comfort zone. He
Mm.
coached cross country at Northridge one year. You know, but
Huh.
there you go. That's what you do.
Yeah.
But and back to that point about out of my comfort, in my early goings, much to the stuff that I like to kid Larson about, I got my master's thesis on, comparing different training systems and doing oxygen consumption levels and so forth in a lab and so forth and so on. I'll never forget the professor told me, well, you've worked all summer to get to calibrate this and that and so forth and so on, and things aren't just right. So you're going to need to come back full time. I said, I'm the coach at Poly High School. He said, well, we got to finish. And, it was the end of my 7 years before I have to start taking classes over again. I took all that research and went down the hall and did a questionnaire with all that information and got that information and got my master's. But anyway, again, that shows you outside of my field. Originally, I had my heart in distance running, and then I spread out over the years. So there now, so I get the job at USC, and we try to make it happen. And remember, it's 12.6. This isn't junior college where I can have anybody and everybody.
Right.
This is in Long Beach State where I can split scholarships to a fine razor edge.
Mm-hmm.
There is no such thing except a full.
Right.
I don't walk into your house and say, I'm going to give you a scholarship, and you have another $25,000, $30,000 underneath your bed to pay for the rest of this.
Right.
So it's important to have walk-ons. I don't care if they're there for academics or whatever else, but I'm going to put bodies. I'm going to build numbers, and track and field is a numbers game. And the other thing is, you take on a program of this nature with a history that it has. There is no event that's not important.
Mm.
This is not a sprint school.
Mm-hmm.
Now, cross country had already been dropped 5 years before I got there. So how are you going to run a distance program? Okay. So I had a club, started a club in intramurals called the Men of Troy.
Wow.
And we took all the walk-ons and we run as a club. Then the rules are you can't coach them. Okay, then I'll get somebody else volunteer to coach. Well, you can't have that. Okay, then I'll tell the kid what to do and they'll coach themselves. So the rules and all the other nonsense, but you do what you have to do. Now, the other thing with building a distance program in downtown Los Angeles.
Oh, yeah.
Try to see how far you can go without stopping at a stop sign or dodging cars. Impossible.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's done. That means you got to van out. You got to van out. Well, you're not going to do anything at this level unless you train twice a day. When are you going to go time to go to class? So, but I never let that go. So I felt it was important that we be tough at 8 and 15. That we be a monster at 400.
Mm-hmm.
And we be the best we could be with everybody else that we could try to get great 1-2 people. We never neglected the hurdles. Every year we were in the hunt in the highs and intermediates. And you know what more NC2A champions have been won in the history of USC? What event? The pole vault.
Oh, is that right? Really?
A lot of people don't know that.
Yeah.
Okay. And the throws and so on, having Dan, Hammer was the area of specialization, but he did a terrific job. I went and got one of my former decathletes from Long Beach City College, whose father is a very famous NFL football player, and John Henry Johnson, his dad, Hall of Famer, and so on. I had a great athletic director. Second to none, and he's a Heisman Trophy winner, the first one at USC. And won the first Super Bowl, the Kansas City Chiefs, and so on. And he loved track.
Mm.
And I can't say more about the fact of how leadership in places I've been, the people in positions of responsibility that make it possible for you to make things happen. Okay. And so when you have that and you have that support, and it may not be financial,
Mm-hmm.
but they're there for you and they understand what you do every day. We'll talk about that later, about what the criteria of athletic directors is today versus what it used to be.
Okay.
But support is so important. An understanding of our sport is important. And a lot of people don't understand
Mm-hmm.
the very roots of what track and field does to an athletic program and to an institution, what it does for diversity, what it does for lots of things.
Mm-hmm.
It is the greatest melting pot of anywhere. The other thing that I tried to do at USC, track is an international sport. And so I went the international route with certain areas. I felt it was important, both in the male and female side, to have a mix. The price is the same, costs the same amount. At that time was 65-70. Today it's probably 85-90,000 a year. Okay. So, you can't split scholarships, you do this and that. And I think the cultural melting pot is invaluable.
Yeah.
Experience that all of our people who have a chance outside of our sport or even during their time of collegiate activity then go on to the post-collegiate and Olympic and international levels. They have learned about other cultures, other people, and so on. And it is so important.
Agreed.
So important.
Yeah, and
And
unique.
so anyway, that mix is something else that I tried to do and I thought was an asset. The first thing we tried to do when I got there with Barbara had two daughters that could run and run really well. And we gave them scholarships naturally. And then I got a lady from Ernie Gregoire who had coached this girl from the time she was young. And I could never describe anybody of what's such an unbelievable person she was or is. Her parents were non-interfering, nothing but support. And her name was Angela Williams. Now, she will go down in history, and I guarantee you she'll go down in history 10, 20 years from now, because she won the 100 meters in the NC2A championships, not once, not twice, but 4 consecutive years in a row.
Yep.
No man has ever done that. And today in our way of things, if you win an NC2A championship in the 100 meters, you will be signing a contract.
Yeah.
You understand?
That's a good point. Yeah.
Because to the shoe companies, remember, every year you get a new crop of athletes from not just domestically,
right,
but internationally and otherwise, and you answer the bell 4 times?
Yeah.
Now, let me tell you another little story, as long as we're talking about Angie. She's going for her 4th title. We'd won the national championships the year before, 2001, the first women's title at USC. And she's going for her 4th. And so I recruit this girl out of junior college in California, and named Natasha Mayers. And she was getting her A degree and so forth and so on. And she had a little injury. And so I did not compete her early. And And even with Angie to this day, I never sent her every year to the NC2A indoor. One year, you can go to the U.S. championships and make the team. And that's the other thing I'm criticized for, because I didn't make a big thing out of the NC2A indoor. I'm old school, where the development is over a year period, it's outdoors and so on. But there's a lot of emphasis on indoors. And what I would do with indoors is before they change the rules on me, I would have somebody go and get a qualifying standard and then go to the NC2A if they're in the hunt. I mean, but now that you got to have 14 per gender,
right?
And it's crazy. And that's all about money. Okay, it's all about money. The cost, and to me, when we get into talking about athletic directors making decisions about the cost of track and field and so on, for example, I told you in the 70s and so on, there were 5 indoor meets on the West Coast. There's not one now.
Right.
Okay, so that means if you're going to indoor meet and everybody's chasing standards and marks in order to get a standard to go to the meet, you're having to pay a lot of money to go get them at standards. And then you're telling people you can't go unless you get a 14th. Don't get me started. I'll shut my mouth.
But I think, isn't there also a cultural difference of a West Coaster versus a Northeastern?
I believe that, but everybody's in the same game. And there is some form of reward from the NC2A financially. If you support the support, you get something.
Right.
But it's what you put out, But anyway. That's just an old guy talking. That's all.
But to your point, the Olympics are outdoor track, right? Not indoor. I mean, the holy grail is outdoor track and field.
Yes. But again, this is just an old guy, and but back to my Angie going for her 4th in a row, 100 meters. Gun goes off. Angie never was behind at 30, 40, 50 meters. She's in the lead, but right there on her hip was Mayers. And between 55 and 80 meters, Mayers goes by.
Whoa.
And the last 12 meters, Angie went zip and beat her at the wire. If you ever saw anybody come close to having here I go and find somebody else to supplement the team. I'm about to destroy history. Yeah. Anyway, that's a story about the 4th in the row.
But that is historic, right? Not only you as a person, so what Angie had to do as far as being prepared each time to race, to be healthy, etc. But
that's right.
Every year, everybody else in the country is throwing their best at you, including her own coach the 4th year. I mean, skill, luck has to play some part of it. I mean, it's amazing. That is super unbelievably historic.
And we've had a lot of other great sprinters. Tori Edwards came the next sprinter that we had, and so on. And so we've had a lot, both men and women. And it was always my job to do the best we could possibly do. We're always in the top 10 in the country. We were 3rd, we were 4th, but it's hard. It's hard in a private school when you can't split scholarships. And I was stubborn about trying to be balanced. I don't know that is, but that was that history tradition that I've had all my life, that to service. And that's one of the things, I mean, when I went into the job at USC, I had Mike Garrett walked me into a room that was square by square, and they had seats all the way around this thing. And I stood in the middle of the floor, and people fired questions at me. Are you capable of handling this job? These are alums. These are boosters. These are everything else. And they questioned me whether I thought that I could do the job.
Mhm.
I did the best job I could. Uh, I'm I'm honored that I had the chance to be, to me, one of the most storied programs in the history
No
of this
doubt.
world. And so, and it's not going to go away. Carol's going to have put more notches on the belt. She's a great coach. The program is great, and it'll always be great, and so on. So I had a chance, and I'll treasure that forever.
I bet. I mean, just the history that was already there in place, the history you and the staffs and the athletes during your time stacked on top of it.
What we tried to do, I mean, the Jesse Williamses of the world. I mean,
Yeah, that's right.
he won 4 NC2A titles, 2 indoor, 2 outdoor.
Mhm.
You know, no, we've, I get into SC here forever, but my first real development guy at SC was, I got to get it so I don't forget anything, but let me hit on a couple of people that
Mhm.
were my staff too. During that, Henry Johnson was my recruiting coordinator. Dan Lang is still one of college's best throws coaches in the
Yes.
country. And Mike Pullins, since I couldn't get Elias, who I talked about exclusively before, Elias coached until he was 80, 85, 86.
Wow.
At the junior college, I saw to it that he had that job forever. And he didn't drive. He took a bus. There was no way he could get up to SC. So I got out one of his disciples, and Mike Pullins did a terrific job. That's why we
Wow.
had 2 NC2A champions in the triple. Both of them jumped 54, 56 feet. They're both 56 footers.
Mhm.
I had people come and help me for nothing at
Mhm.
USC. I had Laszlo Tabori, the 3rd man ever in history to run under 4 minutes. He's a historical figure. You had Bannister, Landy, Tabori,
Yeah.
the 3rd man ever to run under 4 minutes in history. Okay, longtime coach,
Wow.
part of the Igloy, carried the Igloy philosophy and so forth and so on. I had him in my program. We won the Texas relays in the 4x8 2 years in a row.
Ha.
Where did Dwayne Solomon come from?
Yeah.
Can't
Well,
have a lap program? He ran 143.
yeah.
Okay.
Wow.
Dr. Tommy White.
Yeah. Oh man, I forgot all about Dr. White. Yes.
Volunteered for me.
Yes.
Joe Lanning came out and helped me for a while when I had Ryan Wilson. And then Ryan Wilson came back and helped me with the hurdles.
Ha.
Ryan is one of America's young. He's head of the hurdle group for TAC right
Mhm.
now. A great coach.
I love
His
that you
mother
said
said to me, if
TAC,
there's
by the
anything
way.
you do, see to it, my son becomes a coach. He's a great coach, was a great athlete, NC2A champ. Other people that helped me. Tom Walsh was my women's distance coach the whole time I was there. That's the other thing. Staffs always stayed with me. Now,
Mm.
whether I don't know, but I did everything to try to keep them.
Mm.
I talked to you about Barbara Farrer. Tina Fernandez, one of my great sprinters that I had at Long Beach City, female, came back and helped me my last 4 years, even helped me put on the conference meet. She's the current coach at Cal State LA. Kate Carlson was a vault person that helped me for a long, long time. But yeah, I heard some people talking about somebody that is important, but it was along with Jenny Powell. How do you think Jenny Powell
Yeah.
developed? That's Tommy White.
Mhm.
Okay. Right now, who's your Olympic champion and is in the hunt to win it again? Dalila Muhammad.
Mm.
Dalila Muhammad,
Yep.
okay, has blossomed the intermediates, but guess what? She also ran the short hurdles for us.
Mhm.
And if you notice, her airtime is about as good as you could ever possibly be over a barrier. That's because of the influence of Tommy White.
I
And
met
she's being coached right now by an ex-alum from Long Beach City College, I might add.
I met Tommy White back when I used to do the junior elite high hurdle camps at Chula Vista with USATF and loved him. Fell in love with Dr. Tommy White. What an amazing guy. I haven't heard his name in a decade plus. I mean, I love
Yeah.
that guy.
Well, the other thing with post collegians, and we mentioned Tommy White. Also, while I was coaching at Long Beach City College, I got involved in working with post collegians. For 2 years, I coached Regina Jacobs. She won the national championships in the 1500 both years that I coached her. But she ultimately went from Brooks at Stanford to me, and then ultimately up to the Bay Area, where she wanted to go into law school and ended up getting
Right.
an MBA and stayed in the Bay Area. And through her word, I got Billy Concella, and I coached Billy Concella for a year and a half. Billy Concella won the world championships, ran 142 for 800 meters.
Wow.
So I've had a chance to have some people who, were loyal and stayed with me and so forth and so on. I got a chance to work with some very elite people, which the rewards tenfold. But I thought I'd mention just some people who were just NCAA champions at USC and tried to tell you to reinforce the fact I tried to be balanced.
Yeah.
My first athlete to develop ran 47 flat or so in high school, ran 44.4, was Jerome Davis.
Wow.
And was second in the world junior and so forth. But Lionel Larry twice lost the NCAA in photo finishes, ran 44 seconds. Ryan Wilson in the high hurdles.
Yeah.
Felix Sanchez, 2-time gold medalist in the intermediates.
Yes.
Okay. And I might add, when I was talking about Joel Lanning coming back to help me, the year that Felix Sanchez won the NCAA, and they won it, by the way, at Duke on a hard old Mondo track that nobody could get their stride patterns on. It's not the first time, I'm sure, in history, but one of the first times we won the intermediates in both genders.
Oh, wow.
Danvers, who ended up getting the bronze medal from Great Britain. Yep. She won the women and Felix the men. But Felix ended up 2-time gold medalist.
Yeah.
And we can talk about some things there. How he, as a technician, today he's head of all of the Dominican Republic sports programs and so forth for track and field. David Jaworski in the high jump, a 7.5 high jumper. Jesse Williams, 4-time NCAA champion. Dennis Koloff won the pole vault for the NCAA for us. Came from Israel. Was an Israeli soldier before he came. Yeah. Noah Bryant, who got in an accident, a hammer accident, and crushed his face. People thought he would never throw again. Through won the NCAA indoor and outdoor for us. I've got some of those stories. Blas Kiss, 4-time NCAA champion in the hammer. Bank Johansson, another hammer thrower developed by Dan Lang. Alan Sims, 56 and change.
Yeah.
And also Julian Cadepac, who was from France, also 56 in the triple. And one of the reasons that I lost my wife in 2011, and I knew it was time. That was my basis for saying it was time.
Yeah.
But I stayed around for one to see it through for the next athlete that I'll talk about. And before I do that, I'll just list some of the girls that were NCAA champs. Angie, I already talked about. Mayers, by the way, that almost cost the 4 in a row, ended up winning the 200. so she got her day.
Yeah, she got hers. Good.
And so, Brigida Lannerholt, who won the 800 for us, and ended up being a finalist in the Olympic Games in the 800, ran under 2 minutes. Jenny Powell, needless to say, both indoor and outdoor, one of America's greatest ever.
Yep.
Nia Ali
came
to us as she was a 6-foot high jumper, heptathlete, now is one of America's best short hurdles. Won the world championships, indoor, outdoor. She's unbelievable. one of the great really athletes, not just a track person, but an athlete.
Mm.
Inger and the Dastani in the javelin for us that threw right at 190. Eva Overbond, another hammer thrower that was developed at our place and became an Olympian, and so on. And our relay team also won it in the NC2A. But the reason I made my decision after 2011 that I would go through Olympic year, because in about 2009, 2008, the number one track athlete in America was a guy named Bryce Nellam.
Mm-hmm.
And he went to Long Beach Poly High School.
Mm-hmm.
And naturally, that was recruiting territory for me.
Right.
And I got Bryce to sign. His freshman year, he came to a first meet, got there late, jumped in and hurt himself. And so I redshirted him.
Mm.
Next year, it's the fall, and it was Halloween. And there was a Halloween dance that was going to be held off campus, but they targeted the athletic department in terms of brochures and that kind of thing.
Mm.
And it was an ex-athlete that was promoting it. He went to the dance at a club just down the street. And then what they did is they sold tickets at the door to the outside population.
Non-students you're talking.
Correct.
Or, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And to make a long story short, after it concluded, Raishan came out of the dance, turned the corner to go back to the dorms, and two guys shot him through the legs with a shotgun.
Mm.
Now, it's been one thing to get shot with a revolver, but a shotgun does an awful lot of damage because those pellets took care of tendons, muscle tissue, bone, you name it.
Yeah.
So at 2 a.m, I get a call. I rush to the hospital. And to make a long story short, they were gang guys and they knew who he was and they wanted to make sure he never ran again.
Oh.
And that was about to happen.
Oh.
Because they didn't think that was going to happen. He had surgery, and the story goes on that that night I came out, found somebody that wasn't even an athlete, that was a music major, that gave me a clue, got in the car, we went hunting in the middle of the night, and he identified a location. He saw that somebody had hid something or whatever else and so on. And then I used my resources to the street to find some things, and ultimately we caught him. But that took a week or 2 or 3. But in the case of Bryson, he came back to school in a wheelchair. Well, not even that. He went through in 2.5 years, 2 more operations.
Oh, gosh.
At the conclusion of 2 more years, we went from walking to jogging to running.
It's like starting over. Oh.
And on his birthday, 3 years later, he went to the dual meet and said, "Let me run." And he ran, and he got second. And it's the best second he ever got in his life.
No joke.
And, with all my experience with quarter milers, I ran a rehab program. That's somebody said, "What did you do?" I said, well, first of all, he was gifted. But second of all, you learn to, and if there's anything I can say to young coaches, you work with individuals and you work what's given to you. What you do with your communication of what you see, what they feel, and what you have to do to try to have people meet their goals and so on. Well, I won't belabor the story, but it's 2012 and it's the trials. He went from 7th to 3rd in the last
Yes, he
40
did.
meters and made the Olympic team.
Yep.
And my other athlete that was a freshman got 4th. So both of them made the relay. So I went to London because I wanted to protect them. And because most of the time, if you run in the finals, that means you can't have the reward, financial reward, because you're an NC2A athlete. Okay. Well, a lot of things happened. America's best was hidden someplace, didn't know whether he was hurt or whatever else. There was a lot of drama. One guy ran in the prelims and his leg was broken. Well, after the smoke cleared, and I'm training them all the time while we're in London. And I might add, through all of this time, I had a guy named Bill Therio, who is the best massage therapist on this planet. And between he and I, we got Bryce on through all those years. And we ended up, we should have gotten the gold medal. In fact, they gave them a lead. They both ran the fastest splits, both of them, and then we got caught because they went back to an old guy that wasn't fit, and we got caught by the Bahamas at the finish line.
Oh.
But anyway, but then I had a meeting, and we got through the Olympic Games, and I brought the administration in, and I said, look, it's my last year. And so on. And I never said one word to Bryce. And I might, by the way, the team voted and had Bryce carry the flag into the Olympic Stadium.
Awesome.
And the closing ceremony. So that's pretty special. Okay?
Yeah.
Okay. An honor to all the teams. In other words, not just the track and field.
Right.
They voted him to carry the flag for a guy that may never run again to run and end up with a silver medal.
Wow.
So anyway, and that was a climax to me. And I thought, now, and I lost my wife, and this is it. So I met with the administration. I said, I want it quiet. I don't want, we're supposed to host the conference meet. Now I'm going to show them that we can put on this conference meet just as they do in Eugene. And I might add, I love Oregon. I love Eugene, Oregon, and all those people who, including Mr. Johnson, who coaches there, and I might tell a story later on about him. One time, one of my I'll tell that story. Maybe I'll tell it anyway. One of my female vaulters, shoe ripped or something, and I said, I know you got every shoe under the sun. I said, could I get a shoe her size? And he did find it for me, and then he charged me. So I had to write him a check, and then he kept the check in his wallet for years, showing that I wrote him a check for that amount of money. But anyway, no, and there's nobody, and I might add, I've had a chance to work with and against some of the greatest coaches in our sport. You interviewed one of them. You didn't interview him long enough, but there's only one Vin Lanana. You understand? That's a visionary. No, I may be thinking about what we're supposed to do next week or a month from now. He's thinking 3 years from now.
Yeah.
You understand?
Yep.
There are not many in his position. And there's some great coaches. You've interviewed some of them already and so on. I don't fall in that category, but Pat Henry at A&M and what he did at LSU, and he's who he's surrounded with. So, there's some people who are a cut above, and it's shown year in and year out. And they're balanced, and they run the sport track and field.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
you interviewed some people with mounts and everybody else
Yeah.
that have unbelievable communication skills with young people. So on. So anyway, back to my point, and I know where my point is.
So you were going to host conference.
Yeah, I was going to host a conference meet. And like I said before, I got a stadium built at USC, and a woman in 100 years of track and field history, with all those men that had donned that jersey, a woman gave the money to build that. True story.
That's awesome.
And when you come into the stadium, the first thing you come into is Zamperini Plaza. Well, you know, those of you who saw the movie about Louis Zamperini and the book Unbroken and so on, I lived through all that at USC too.
Yeah.
Because I was on tour a lot of the times with Louis, with the book and with his story and so forth and so on. That's why I said the history of this sport, second to none.
Amazing. Yeah.
And by the way, I just read a book that was in Track and Field News advertised about Olympic Heritage, American Justice. It's a good book. Talks about the 32, 36 games and our turbulent times right now. Everybody should read that book. I recommend it highly. Make sure you read that book. Anyway, the other thing is, now we're talking about that. I was going to say they advertised it in the last Track and Field News with Alice and Felix on the cover. And as long as we're talking about Alice and Felix, again, you know, I told you I cried once in Wilson High School in 1967. I cried when I signed Alice and Felix to USC, and her brother happened to be the captain of my men's team. And by a trivia question, you give she's the most storied female athlete in American collegiate track and field, or not collegiate, but in track and field history. Her brother, Wes, who's her agent, was the captain of my men's team. And by the way, people don't know, he was runner-up in the 100 meters. Nobody knows that. That's a little trivia question for all of you guys. Wes Felix got second in the 100 meters in lane 7.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Now, I signed Allison, and, you know, she's going to LA Baptist College, LA Baptist High School. And, you know, because of the fact that she was running so well in high school, she got invited to go to Mexico City at altitude, a mile high. So she goes, runs 22.2. And what do we need to go to college for? So forth, so on. And so her dad is a minister, and they came to me and the family. There's no one like the Felix family. They're terrific. Mom's a teacher, and it's all reflected within Allison every time she opens her mouth, what kind of person she is. And the whole family's that way. And they came to me, but she wanted to go to SC. I said, well, shoot, okay. And Nike, she could be at SC. She still got a swish on. So, but, you know, Adidas got in the picture, and that was there. I said, okay, tell them you want to, not 4 years, 6 years, guarantee, because you may have breaks in your education, travel, or whatever else, this and that. And, you know, but she graduated right on time.
Wow.
But she walked around that campus for 4 years. Nobody knew who she was. Meanwhile, she was lighting up the world.
Yeah.
Now, do you think we could have won a few more NCAA women titles?
Right. I mean, it's the alum of non-alums.
But that SC embraces her, believe me.
Absolutely.
Yes. But she always tells everybody I'm a Trojan, so that's it.
Absolutely.
Anyway, but another story where I cried a tear.
Yes. Yeah. We had Wes was at the Olympic Training Center with us. I was on the hurdle side, but we had the sprinters at the same time. So we had Wes there during that time, and I just remember he was, at least I had him for a week or whatever, real quiet, just kind of this quiet confidence. Yes,
well,
sir, no, sir.
One story about him is the conference meet was UCLA. He won both the 1 and the 2, and he got a respiratory infection. So I thought, oh, this is not going to work. And there's no way we're going to go through rounds. And I might add this, and I never treat a racehorse like a plow horse.
Mm.
Okay. And I've never done that. And if somebody wants to say, yeah, you did know that, with Jerome Davis, he thrived off running both relays, running 4-2, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But no, I don't do that. It's and if you have international athletes, they got to go back in the summer and put on their country's jersey.
Right.
And guess what? You want to cut off that connection?
Right. Yeah, good point.
And have them go back tired. Okay. So the bottom line is that you were talking about Wes. Wes, I had to make a decision. His best race was 200 meters.
Mm-hmm.
He was a better deuce runner. But I said, well, with this respiratory infection, he'll never get through rounds.
Right.
And I mean, serious respiratory infection. And so we scratched the relay, and he just focused on the 100, and he ended up getting the silver.
Wow.
Otherwise, he'd have been right in the hunt at deuce. I'll tell you.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that was his top. Yeah, for sure.
So anyway, that's the Felix story as well.
Good.
Okay,
like I said, met him. Good family.
A little bit with SC, but I tried to be balanced. But what happened is, Nelum said, "I'm going to come back. I want to try to win the NC2A title
after the Olympics."
After the Olympics, and he could have gone.
Yeah,
graduated. He's the one. I never said a word to him about this. He's the one that said, "I want to try," and they petitioned and got him his 6th year.
Yeah, because he redshirted the first year.
Right. He got his 6th year of eligibility.
Good for him.
What happened to him? And he won the NC2A, which was, and the other was Reggie Wyatt, and Reggie Wyatt ran 36 seconds in the 330s in high school, but he was a dominant right leg guy and so on. And I never forget, we constantly worked on stride patterns, varying things up and so forth and so on, but he was not comfortable on his left leg and so on, and especially in the turns. Okay. And so he'd swing wide, trail his leg, flags up. Well, I'll never forget that day they both won. He won it. And I looked at those judges on both ends of the Oregon track and to see if any yellow flags were going up. And I looked at the sky and said, thank you, God.
You.
Okay. So we walked out with 2 NC2A champs. And I did not run the relay because I was not going to do that to Nelum or any of that other stuff. He was there to win the NC2A title in the 4. And so, and then I told people the administration, there were about 5 of them, but this time Garrett had retired and things changed at USC. The Reggie Bush thing with the scandal and so forth, him winning the Heisman Trophy and the issues of the Reggie Bush, and they can all read about that. But what happened was when I came to USC, there was one compliance officer. Okay. One. Her name was Leslie Dalen. For those who are historians, her last name Dalen is significant because her father's one of the greatest swim coaches in the history of swimming. Okay. Okay. And you know what he gave me when I came to USC? Track and Field News is bound from 1948, the first one, all the way through the 50s.
Wow.
Why? Because swim coaches would go and read what was happening in track and field and try to apply training schemes to an aquatic sport.
Interesting.
Her father gave me bound copies, and I left all that stuff for USC in the Heritage Room, and I kept our Heritage Room where I did nothing but collect memorabilia and history of USC.
Yeah.
And people gave things that are invaluable. And hopefully the new building, I hope they put all that stuff back in there because
Oh, I'm
it's a
sure they
treasure.
will. I'm sure they will. I told the story the first time I visited SC when I went to visit Carol and Quincy. I go there. I'd never been there. Through 10 years of coaching college and 15 years here almost at Gill, I'd never been to SC. So I go into what's now the old coaches' offices. They have just announced or just about to announce the new place. And I go in and I'm waiting for Carol to get done. She's with another meeting, and I'm looking around and there's trophies. I mean, trophies, plaques everywhere.
Yeah, that was my thumbtack room. That was the heritage room. That's what but I did it with thumbtacks. Now they're going to put them frames.
Yeah, right. I look down and there's literally it's on the ground. It's as if it's, there's 100,000 trophies there, and it's just another trophy just sitting on the ground in the, underneath the desk even. I look at it and I think it was a third or second place NCAA trophy. And I was like, but that's when you got so many trophies when a top 3 NCAA trophy is just, there's no room for it, if you will. That's history right there.
It is. Yep. No, the new building will be terrific, and a group of men that are, and this brings a point to me. I'm going to touch on this before I forget it, because at this age I forget things quickly. But one of the things that I was starting to stress was the fact that leadership and who's in charge. After with what happened at USC with the going on probation because of football, that has an effect on everything else. They had I told you, one compliance officer when I went, and when I left, they had 22.
22.
Thank you.
Holy cow.
And all these people have law degrees. And, my last 3 years at USC, I would sit in on the interviews because everybody became a bean counter, in other words. And I'd ask people, well, you have a law degree. You want to be a compliance officer? What are your goals and objectives? I want to be an athletic director. I want to be a conference commissioner. That is the path that people to take today in order to be athletic directors.
Interesting.
So, and we'll talk about that later on too. It's not ex-coaches anymore that are athletic directors. Right. You must have a business, an MBA degree or a law degree in order to be an athletic director at a major Division I school in America. They may have never coached a day in their life. And to me, that's part of the problem. Because they don't know what you do every day. They don't know what you need. Well, they just know what they need to do to maintain what they have to do, whether that's the finances or whether that is the compliance, but that's what their job is.
Well, maybe this is a good time to transition to that, because you had mentioned that, and I wrote it down. I want to make sure we talked about. You talked about how ADs are chosen then versus now, if you will, and then even so much. I'm thinking of a quote that I believe it was Vin Lanana said in another great podcast, podcast by a good friend Matt Eshe, The Meeting of the Unknowing Minds. I believe it was Vin that talked about, coaches, track coaches. We're famous for saying our sport is different than football. Our sport is different. You can't have a 64 team national champion like that. We're different. And Vin's statement was, we might need to start thinking differently than that, because ADs and people in general don't know our sport.
Yep, there's what I talked about with Lanana as a visionary.
And it's interesting that you gave the example way back at, I believe it was Wilson, no, maybe it was when you first went to Poly, using music and having the kids warm up in a separate place. You made it an event. You made it a happening, I think it was your statement.
Yes.
So talk to us about what you see in today's track world. We know that we're in a, I don't want to say necessarily a crisis, but maybe we are. We're having programs that are being dropped. We're obviously overall in a budget crisis when it comes to the effects of coronavirus and the athletic departments. What do you see that we either need to learn from our history of other events and happenings that we need to pull back into today, or what do we need to do differently?
Well, I don't, I'll curtail this by saying, you know, rules and regulations and scheduling and conferences and so on have impacts because those are all structures that you have to work within. What, where you fall, I mean, when I first went to USC, my office was in the football office. Well, I was there until the light went off, just like the football coaches. And I had football players that filled. That's the way you stretch scholarships in a private school.
Right.
You understand?
For sure.
And so, yeah. But, you know, once I had my own world with Mrs. Loker built the stadium, then I was away from that. And, you know, Pete Carroll, who was, you know, one of the most famous football coaches, still is,
Yeah.
you know, possesses all of the qualities and so forth to be a successful coach, you know, forgot about track because I'm out there now. So I think that's important too. You know, you better make friends and you better be colleagues with your other staff members in there. But once I was at USC, all of us were in a separate world. We were in our own, the swimming pool's over here, the tennis court's over here, and so forth, football, basketball's over across the street, and so on. You see each other once a month in a staff meeting.
Right.
But, you know, that camaraderie and communication with the coaches and with the administration, you know, I think your selling never stops. You have to sell your sport not only to your colleagues, to the secretaries, to the clerks, to the people who take care of your field or whatever. You're in the sales job, and doggone it, you're also in the entertainment business. And if you don't understand that you're in the entertainment business and that you're not an agent to sell your product and so forth, to get in this world, it's the cyber world. I'm gone beyond that. I'm in the newspaper business, which is now dying on the vine.
That's not good, yeah.
But, you don't understand. But whatever it takes to get your sport, I used to put on sports luncheons when I was at Long Beach State, not because of Tarkanian or because of Lute Olson or whatever else. People came to hear them, but guess what? You know who was putting it on, don't you? So track got mentioned. So you do what you do to keep selling what we do and how important it is. And that's part of your job. I'm sorry, it's part of your job. And if you got to put people in seats.
Yes.
If I had a program link in the chain with an alum that every kid off the street that wanted to come in and see the meet, sit them down, let that young kid see. They had a policy that, you know, in the turbulent times in the 90s that I was at USC, you know, and they had a program that said, well, we're going to open up the track, lights on all night long or whatever else, so people can come and jog or whatever else all night long. Well, you know, today all these tracks at all these colleges got padlocks on it. You can't get on a track. Well, our track was open to the community. I said, if it's open to the community, it should be open to the kids' track program. They should be able to come out here at night. And then I fought for it and I got it. And those kids had a place to run at night under the lights. So my point is I don't know what my point is anymore. You got to battle. The fight never stops, but you got to educate people. And like I said before, my job now is to mentor other coaches, help people get job recommendations and so forth and so on. See to it that people that are qualified and have the credentials get the jobs they deserve. Every place I've ever been, I've seen to it, and I'm not going to say this because that sounds politically correct. As I said, the administration at USC, I said it's time. They said, what do you mean by it's time? I said, it's time to hire the next coach that reflects the population of our sport. I saw to it that every place I've been, I saw to it whoever replaced me fell in that category, and I'll leave it at that. There are some things I'll preach about, and that's one I will.
I know, hindsight's 2020, but if there was ever a person that was ready for that job, no matter male, female, white, black, doesn't matter, Carol was the right person for that job.
Well, guess what? Guess what? I recommended 5 men and 1 woman. You can guess it from there. Okay?
You talked about at SC.
I don't know why those 5 men, but you saw who got the job.
Yep, absolutely. The right person. That's right.
I gave 5 men, 1 woman. I won't name those 5 men, but I'll just leave it at that.
You mentioned.
And then I saw to it that I told Quincy, take your ego and check it at the door. Get on the phone and say, I want to do this.
Yes.
Yeah. And that marriage happened, and there couldn't have been a better combo ever. And she was smart enough to keep Dan Lang, who's as good a throw coach as any place in the country.
Yeah. Dan's amazing. The longevity through many different coaches and ADs, et cetera, in a tough place, no on-campus training area. I mean, he is.
We had to go to West LA.
Yep.
And talk about putting lipstick on a pig. You should see the dirt field and so forth, but it was named after Harold Conley during the 84 Olympic Games and so on. And so we continued to make it. And when they started to build a building on that facility, we had to go have another one built. And we'd have to go and put flags up and make it look sweet and nice, especially. And then finally, when I hosted the conference meet my last year, Cal State LA had set up a nice field and so forth. So we had a real beautiful place to throw a hammer. Cal State LA.
Yeah, Dan's the magic man when it comes to throws, man. Development, recruitment.
And, and that's the other thing for coaches. Gosh damn, come on. You get 6 attempts if you do it all right to get a performance. The silent killers of field events. Come on, guys. You're going to run a track program. You want to score points. You want to win. You go. That's why it says field. The rules, the game. Guess what? You got 3 attempts to get a mark, and if you do it right, you're going to get 6. And I see that you talked about Mr. Ash and a whole story on him. He scored over 40 points in a conference meet and cost us the championship at Cal. Yes, 40 some points. How in the hell is one guy going to score 40 points? I had the long jump one, and he comes down on his last jump and wins the damn. So come on.
Well, stay there on happenings, and your job is to sell your program and sell your sport in your administration in your athletic department. What's the roles? Because you talked a lot about dual meets. What's the role in dual meets today as it was back then?
Well, again, administrations make NC2A rules. I don't know what makes some of these rules, but they put squad limit sizes and numbers games. It's a numbers sport. You have people who are developmental. There are people who want to go to the institution that you work at that still have an interest in the sport and still want to work at it and still do something. You understand? And I would stand at the end of a goddamn 5,000 meters in a dual meet of my walk-ons and shake the hand of every one of those guys. They may be coming in not in those first 3 categories, first, second, or third, but they fought all the way through and they represented and so on. And they were there to represent the school. And I'll tell you a typical example. At USC, they have 3 categories of eliteness academically. The very elite. And I can't I can't remember the category names.
Sure.
I had a young man that put one foot in front of the other, but he worked his butt off. He coached my men at Troy's team because he had to be the coach. He didn't win that category academically. He swept it. Nobody in the history of the university has done that. He won all 3 categories. In graduation, he had more stuff on him than somebody that was a Queen of Sheba. Do you understand?
Wow.
He looked like Allison Felix with all her stuff on. No, and here's a guy, he'll be the next president of the United States. He wanted to stay in his sport. What did he do in his part-time? He collected old shoes and sent them to Africa.
Wow.
See, these are the things. Don't tell me I have to turn people away. I've never in my, and I was being told my last couple of, oh, you can't have that. You're causing too much paperwork for the compliance people. Oh, the training room means they have to give time to them. Okay, well, priority registration. Okay, well, I'll have them come 2 weeks after priority registration. All sorts of excuses.
Wait a minute. Paperwork for the compliance. There's 22 of them.
Thank
They
you.
needed
They got
work.
22 of them.
They needed the work.
What the heck are those guys doing?
Exactly.
Come on. And I'm not kidding. There are some people that are in the compliance office that do nothing but monitor your cell phone. Oh, you think I'm kidding?
Wow.
My cell phone was they want to make sure that, that I don't recruit somebody outside of the time limit or blah, blah, blah.
Right.
Or that they check at USC. They will check to see what you're doing on social media.
You, the coach.
Huh?
You, the coach.
Compliance officers.
Wow.
That was going on. People think I'm kidding. But now they can't do anything to me. I'm retired.
That's right.
I dissolved. This secret is out or whatever else. Yeah, no, Big Brother's watching. Yeah, no.
What?
No, I mean, they everybody is concerned about liability and this and that and so on. I'm not saying those are good people. I mean, the compliance officer went with me on every trip. I loved her to death. Now she's way up in the administration. She's got a law degree from Ohio State. She's great. No, and a lot of those key people, they were great. They're great. And guess what? They'll be commissioners someday.
Yeah. What was the change that you saw in athletics where it went from, it was really coveted that you were an athlete and a coach to become an athletic director because you could understand what your staff, the coaches and athletes were doing, where it churned to where it was more of the, call it the CEO-ness, running a business side of it. So law degrees, compliance officers, et cetera, getting moved up to athletic directors.
I think, jobs that college presidents, their mandate, and same thing with athletic directors. It's what you build, facilities. You understand? That's all goals of track coaches, to have nice facilities, great equipment, have all the bells and whistles and everything else. But athletic directors, when they come into a job, is what they build, or what they do financially, what they do with contracts and so on. I'll tell you one great thing that's happened with track to some extent is those conferences that have cable networks, because they can't show football and basketball 24 hours.
Right, content.
So they got to fill that airtime so track gets a little exposure. So you're going to get a chance to watch the track and field on those cable stations. But and having the Diamond League on cable and national championships and so forth, those are all good things. We can talk about a lot of things. I think, oh God, track coaches today, those programs, they put on big invitationals. Why? They're trying to raise money for their program. You want to kill the sport? Have a sport that goes 10 hours a day. You come out in the morning. What kills age group track? Well, when I was at age group track or women's track in the club system, they had just girls. Now they got boys and girls. So you got two genders, and you got age groups.
Yeah, all the age groups. Yeah.
You understand? You don't wear the kid out; you wear the parents out.
Mm.
You can take your child to a soccer game or to another sport and spend an hour and a half, 2 hours, and you're home with the rest of your family the rest of the weekend.
Mm-hmm.
If you're in track, you're leaving at 6, 7 in the morning to get there, and then you're there until the sun's setting, and you've had a chance to see your child run or jump or something maybe once or twice during that time span, and you're killing the parents. And after a while, the parents will say, "Oh, heck no, I ain't going to sit out there every weekend." No, people have got to start thinking outside the box here.
But are we beholden that you mentioned, universities having large meets and the youth groups, which there's a lot of entries.
And marks.
Marks and the
One
money.
of the things is about our sport is to compete.
Mm-hmm.
Marks the highest form of intensity is to compete. But we go to meets, all these meets, to get a standard to go someplace else. Or, one of the things I liked about what Florida does, when they have an invitational, they have a meet one day for events, and then the next days are relays and all the other stuff. So, okay, you got your marks here. Now we're going to go and compete and have fun. So I like what Mouse did there. That's good stuff. But a lot of meets, you'll see, for example, the weekend of the last part of April. Okay, that's kind of Mount Sac week. All right. Well, Mount Sac goes for 4 days. All right. Well, a Long Beach State and a Pomona Pitzer and a Cal State LA, and there may be 5 other places because the team's got to come out, and they're not going to get into Mount Sac because their marks aren't good enough. Or I'm going to compete one day here and the next day there, and it's about entry fees.
Right.
You understand?
Yep.
And it's because that's how they support themselves. How can I be critical of that? Because, they're just trying to survive.
Yeah. That's what I was asking. Is it a product of its own system with the age group, all those kids, all the big meets, all the team entries?
And you don't have dual meets anymore. Right. And they have justification. If anybody could have, when I came to USC, they were having 3 and 4 day meets. I mean, they bring BYU in with UCLA because we can't compete with UCLA anymore. I said, bunk, we can't. I'll take walk-ons. I'll figure out a way. I'll get football players, whatever we have to do to line up, because that's important to recruiting. That's important to track and field in Southern California. Mm-hmm. What SC and UCLA did in those days of dual meets and so forth was wonderful for the sport. And it's competitive. You understand?
How many years were you?
Come to see sport.
How many years were you at USC?
20.
What's your USC UCLA record?
Well, I'm sure that Larson and all of them can tell you.
I thought you would know right off the top.
No. We beat them.
Yeah. Oh, I know you did. Yeah.
But there were some changes at UCLA, and we were getting stronger and so forth and so on. And we kind of, it was something that I built on, took my licks and built over time.
Right.
But I never gave up on that.
Right.
You understand? And that rivalry, there are people that come to that meet that are not track people, but they come there because of the identification of one school versus the other.
Right.
Okay. And there were times where push came to shove. As the man that I kiss his ring, John Smith, and I said, "Oh, this is just like the old days," when we were all growing up.
Yeah.
No, there were times where things got testy, and that's and to some extent, I love that.
Yeah, and I think that's really, I think that's really important. Not the fighting, but the rivalry, to be able to show up and even not know anything about the sport, I can still, if I go to a curling match and it's USC versus UCLA, I don't know anything about curling, but if there's a score, I'll know who's leading, therefore who I'm cheering for.
Yep.
So I think that's really, I think is really important with the dual meet aspect of track and field that we just don't
But
have a lot of.
it requires, with the scholarship limitation, numbers. It
Right.
requires allowing squad sizes, not narrowing them. You understand?
Right. Yeah.
Tell me why. Well, that means more uniforms. Come on. How many places that I've been that I keep the same uniform, or somebody else got a different uniform as long as it's got something on it that
Right.
shows who you're representing? Come on.
Excuses.
Another thing that I've done over the years, when I have a banquet, I have a banquet. No, I honor the accomplishments of the athletes for that year. And I inherited some of that, but I built upon it at SC, but I started a long time ago. Wherever I was at, if I had to go and I'd make deals with trophy people to give me old stuff, and I'd recycle them. All of us have done what we've had to do. I've polished up new stuff and so on. If you went into the track office and you saw the big trophy that you saw as soon as you went in, when you went in that thing, that was in a trash bin across the street. I took it up, recycled it, refixed it up. It was from the 30s. They don't make trophies like that anymore. You understand? So, no, you go to a banquet, everybody dresses up. Everybody comes in, chandeliers. I've got a 3-piece jazz group playing in the corner during the hour where everybody's socializing and so on. I've got video screens showing all the meets from the season. Every athlete is introduced one at a time that speaks in front of the mic, whether they were a walk-on or whether they were an NC2A champion. Wow. Everybody's honored and so on. Some people say, you go to a banquet at Allice's, you're there for 3 hours. No, I'm not quite. But the bottom line is that's important because I'm selling to the parents and the parent that just paid $70,000 this year to pay them, have their kid go to school there, and their opportunity and so on. And to see to it that they cherish. When I have the greatest rewards you can have as a coach, or have athletes come back and say, I cherish the time that I was there.
Yeah.
Now, that I did my job. I created an environment to allow them to pursue their goals and achieve to the best of their ability and create an atmosphere where they belonged and felt comfortable. And if I did that, then my career and my life has been a success.
Well, let's talk about careers. We've talked about the sport and the meets for track. Let's talk about the coaches. You had talked about coaches in their comfort zone and always continually learning. You said even today at 80 years old?
Yes.
You don't come off as an 80-year-old, my man. Congratulations. I hope I'm as spry as you are at 80, honestly. What are you doing today, educational wise, and then why is that important for a coach all the way through their career?
Well, it's my way of giving back. I never had to leave a 30-mile radius. It was easy for me. I'd already worked, bought a home, got a second home, and so on. I had stability because I had a partner in life. I have children who have all been successful. And I hear from them every day. That's how, and you know, I don't know that I deserve that, but I give credit to their mother for seeing to it that was what they did. I also had a hook or a rope around me that every time they had a event or function, I was there.
Yeah.
And I made sure of that. Okay. But you understand, uh, I worked hard. I would go in and come back late. And there, but I made sure that I was there for them, and they're there for me now.
That's
Okay.
awesome.
When I'm 80. And my only regret is that she's not here for them.
Yeah.
But my point is, I'm I'm so grateful to this community who, as I've told you, I grew up in an inner city environment. I grew up when I went to between the time that I went from Long Beach Poly to Long Beach City, I moved in 5 different houses. As soon as we couldn't pay the rent, I went to the next one. The idea is this city and this community, Southern California. Now I'm in the big tech. The other thing that track has to fight is, remember when I was growing up, yeah, the dual meet had thousands of people there and so on. But there is a pro franchise in Los Angeles in every sport under the sun.
Mm.
You understand? That's why I keep saying you're in the entertainment business, folks.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? If you don't understand that, you're striving to try to get people's interest in what you do and what the product that you produce. And if not, they ain't coming. They're not
Right.
coming. Because unless you got something they want to see, they're not coming. So the only way that your athletes in high school, but I mean, now you're in the cyber world, you're in the me generation. That means that, everybody's taking a picture of themselves doing this and that and so forth to this group. So the way Carol operates and the way I had to operate, it's a different world. You can showcase. It's about showing your product and show them in success and team and performance and everything. It's all about sales. And you don't, my latter years, I on a recruiting trip, I'm talking to the parent more than I'm talking to the 18-year-old.
Hmm.
You know what I'm saying? That's the difference. I mean, I'm old, but being around young people keeps me young. Okay. So I still try to help young people who still pursue goals. I've been there, done that. I've been a national coach. I've been this and that, and so forth and so on. I've done all those things. And when you're a national coach, everybody's all those teams brought together. They all got their own coaches. You understand?
Mm-hmm.
You're an Olympic coach. You're a national coach and so on. You're there just to put that thing together, okay? And don't screw them up. Get them to the line on time, and so forth and so on, and don't screw it up.
Yep.
It's like I told the press. You guys aren't going to be able to find me if I'm in charge of the relay and something goes wrong, because I'm
Right.
a hide my head. I'm a duck in a hole and hang myself. So no, but this is you've been that. Now is the time to help the coaches that are coming up, guys that are starting. And what I tried to do is to show them, it's okay. You don't have to make quantum leaps.
Mm.
You don't have to go from being an athlete to be a college coach. Build your rep, build your skill set, be knowledgeable, do research, study, get certification 1, get certification 2, go on beyond that. Go sit and listen to Ralph Mann. Go and do your homework.
Yeah.
And learn about biomechanics, learn about exercise physiology, and be the best you can be so you make decisions. And no two coaches coach the same.
Hmm.
You may have the same knowledge level, you may know all of it, but you never stop learning, because how you handle an athlete, that's the beauty of this sport.
Yeah.
Is you're working with individuals. And there isn't anybody that you've interviewed that won't tell you that that's what you do.
I
How
hear.
you adapt
Yep.
to that athlete, whether it's a Dwight Stones or whether it's a walk-on. Okay, there's a difference in what you bring to that person, what they need. Dwight Stones had been an individual all his life. I made him team captain. Now he's a team guy.
Yeah.
And that's another thing. Everybody talks about age group track. I think you should be exposed to other sports. If you've been in a team sport, you bring something to the table to track and field. You bring team to an individual sport. And your mindset, bring in a football player, bring in a basketball player, bring in a soccer player. They're about a team thing.
Right.
There's nothing wrong with that. That's good stuff. And so I think that young people, when you're young and you want to be serious about the sport, get serious about it once you get to high school. But on the way up, if I'm a parent, I'm going to expose my child to lots of things.
Absolutely.
It's okay to surf. It's okay to play golf. It's okay to do these other things, because one of the things I didn't talk about in women's track. My second year or so forth with the Comets, one of my girls was a javelin thrower, and she worked the recreation department. She says, I got a girl playing softball, and she can stand in center field and throw the ball to the catcher on a rope. Oh, really? Bring her to me. I'll just say one name, and she was the only woman to get a medal in the Olympic Games in Munich. Kate Schmidt.
Yeah.
226 feet. She was a best American javelin thrower. In 4 months' time, she went from playing softball to winning the girls' junior championship.
Really?
In the javelin, yes.
Wow.
So I rest my case with some of this stuff. As you can see, I still preach. That's what happens when you get old.
Well, and you get deference. I'll just let you go, man, because it's all what is great is there's a lot of you're saying a lot of the things that we're hearing from some of the other great coaches, the Mouse, the Brooks Johnsons, Judd Logans, coaching the person, not the event or not the sports. Yeah, you're can't think of the word here, but you're solidifying that what we're hearing from other coaches.
Yes. Everybody has their strengths and weaknesses. And, that's an age-old deal. Do you work to somebody's strengths, or do you work to their weaknesses? Or what do you do? And what's the personality of that person? Okay. And I'll tell you another thing that I think is very, very important. It's an individual sport. The things that you carry from track and field, you carry the rest of your life, because once you step the end of a runway, once you step into a ring, or once you step into a starting block or into your lane, it's all on you. The coach can't help you anymore. It's on you. It's your preparation and what you've done, and now you're going to do that. But nobody's there to help you except yourself, to get the most out of yourself. And the other thing that is a pet peeve of mine is when coaches make people dependent upon them. You need to make people self-reliant. They're in a sport that is self-reliant and that carries over in life, because people who have been in track and field know how to compete, because they've had to compete, because they had to do it themselves. So when you go out in the big bad world, I don't care what your profession, you're going to have to compete. You got to compete in our society. And so, doggone it, this is a good place to learn.
Well, let's talk about it.
Don't make people dependent. And I saw that in women's track for years, where, girls are attentive, they're conscientious, they're, this and that, and they hinge on every word and so forth. And, they're more enthusiastic about working. And after a while, the coaches, the person can't go to the line without checking with the coach. You know what I'm saying? No, you create independence within the athletes. Very important in the structure of this sport.
I think that's a real issue in some places for maybe other sports. I don't know. I focus on track, about that over-reliance and lack of self-reliance. However, I've heard feedback from coaches that because of the expectations put on them. You know, they're the academic coordinators, they're the athletic trainers. I know we have those support people, but you even mentioned yourself at 2 a.m. when the incident with Nellums happened. Who'd they call? They called you. You know
Well,
what
of
I'm saying?
course, they're
Yeah,
supposed to. My door has never been closed.
right.
The the writer for USC, for Los Angeles Times, the Press Telegram, and now has his own blog. And I call him Deep Throat, okay? You know, because of the Nixon deal.
Yeah,
But the
that's a
issue
Watergate
is,
reference,
no
everybody.
Watergate. You know, the bottom line is he didn't want to go at USC to where all the beat writers were and so on. So he would come to my office at night, and I let him use one of the coaches' offices in my building because I was in there every night. He'd write his story there. You know, the bottom line is, Jack Rose told me a long time ago, who do you make friends with? You better make friends with the guy that takes care of your field in those days,
Yeah.
and the person that writes the stories.
Yeah.
In high school, I would take the results every meet and take it to the newspaper. I'd take the results. So I made sure that kid the next morning saw his name in the paper.
So come back to me on the doors always open, because if there's one word I would describe nearly every coach I've ever met for track, is it's selfless. I mean, coaches are so much givers to their athletes and to their program. How do you justify, I don't know if I'm using the right word there, how do you deal with being that selfless, doors always open, but also creating self-reliance within your athletes? Those are opposed to each other.
Well, you know, I remember a guy was supervising me my last couple of years. He's had academic services, and the athletic director wanted everybody to have all their rules printed and then have them posted. I said, this is not elementary school.
Right.
And they said, well, how do you know when someone breaks a rule? I don't know somebody breaks a rule or does something they're not supposed to do, or they need to. My door is always open. Believe me, I know when to discipline somebody, when not to discipline somebody. I said, I don't, you know. And then, you know, it was like elementary school, you know, pledge allegiance and all that. You had somebody who was a nice person, but he didn't have a clue, in my opinion, about being an athletic director. And it's been documented since, you know, after Garrett, and you can follow and you check all that stuff out. But, you know, the bottom line is, no, I'm there for them. When I'm talking about independence, it's independence as an athlete. That yes, you can question me and you can say why. And it's my job to tell you why and so on, not to just say, follow me. And then if you're out on the field, and guess what? I tell people all the time, even in big programs in high school, go find a volunteer, teach them just to do drills. You may not know what the hell you're doing with those drills, but if you know what the mechanics of that drill is, if those kids do that over and over again, you're coaching, and you don't have to know why. They can come to me and I'll tell them why separately. So yes, it's an educational thing, but if you're dealing with lots of kids, oh, how in the hell do I count? You're telling me I got to have numbers. Then go find other people to do other aspects of it. But in terms of, is the door always open for me? The big things, I'm there.
Right.
Always be there. And no matter what that problem is, whether that's a personal problem, whether that's an athletic problem, I'm there. I've always been there. And I've been a father to a lot of people.
That's a great place to stop right there, Ron. When we started this, I told you, you know, we let this go to honor what the story goes. We just did 3 hours, my friend.
You're kidding.
I knew you would. I knew you didn't know. You're so focused and in it, man. I knew you. I was like, I don't think he knows what it is. But that was 3 great hours. I think there's so much value there in
You're not
for our
going to have
listeners.
anybody listen to that. They'll be asleep.
No, 100%, buddy. I'll shock you. I'll tell you what. I'll show only you. I don't show stats because it's not about stats. It's about people. I'll show you a month after this airs, not only how many people listen to it, because that's one thing, but they show me on the little stat counter on what's the average listen time. So if I put out a 3-hour stinker and the average listen time is 30 minutes, well, that's no good, right? I'll show you. I'll prove it to you that your counsel, your experience is valued out there. People are going to listen to this one to the very last drop, my friend.
Well, I appreciate the compliments. I will finish this by saying I did not do this by myself.
Amen.
I have had some of the best athletes in the world. I've had some of the best student athletes that have been part of all of this, and when people ask me, who is your greatest or best, or I tell them I can't answer that, because I can tell you stories about people who did not run fast, jump high, or throw far, okay, that have made an impact on my life. And I've had tutelage and mentorship from people in this sport that had an influence on me that made me a better coach and made me, including assistant coaches, that sometimes don't get the spotlight. You know, I remember being interviewed after we won the women's first title, and I'm at Oregon, and the announcer said something to me. I says, no, there's not many times you grab that brass ring. I said, but look at the assistant coaches, who did their job today to see to it that cumulatively all this comes together.
Right.
And you know what? Yes,
that's important.
There's gratification that's being an assistant. Someday you'll be a head. But you know what? When you become a head coach, you become an administrator. And your job description. And that's one of the things I didn't allow to happen. I love to coach, and I wasn't going to give up coaching no matter what the administrative responsibilities were. And in some cases, I've done it in places where I was in a have-not situation, that sometimes I didn't delegate it as I should have, made that I had to work harder and longer in order to do that so that I could still coach. And it is important if you can find and delegate some of those administrative responsibilities and spread it out. And sometimes I didn't do that. That's been a fault of mine, and so on. It made me work harder, longer, and so forth and so on. But I had the energy to still do it all. So
today you do. Right now you can.
Okay. Yeah. Enough. This is a project of a lot of people that made a lot of programs and a lot of athletes successful.
Well, that's what I love about your story, Ron, is it's a story of community, from natural geography community, the Long Beach area. What an amazing ride it's been with different places and different people there, but even the community that you built from all around the world, really, with your athletes coming in to whatever school you were at the time. To me, this is all about community, and people has been kind of the hallmark of your journey, is what I've learned today.
Well, I hope that is conveyed. Thank you.
Awesome. Ron, thank you so much for being here today. I appreciate you so much for taking out time, a lot of time in your day for me, man. That means the world to me. I'm just so honored.
Okay. It's an honor to make this. I hope that I put some people to sleep, because 3 hours, that's oh my gosh.
Love you to death, Ron. Thank you, sir.
Take care.